Good evening. Welcome back. We are at, we've already done our agenda. We've already done the pledge, everything. So we're coming out of closed session. It is 7:23. We have no action coming out of closed session. We're immediately going to go into our discussion on several things here. I've had a request that we go to D1 first, because that's going to be fairly quick, and that's a discussion on a message board. If that's okay with D4? Okay. It's a D1 here, so all right. So D1, is that right? All right.
Yeah, it's D4, and actually, I think Jenny and
D4 or
Mark,
D1?
Yeah,
E4. E4.
Oh, E4.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So with that,
Yeah.
we'll do a few minutes on this, and then we'll get to the main topic, which is the budget workshop. But we also have a legislative update that we'll get, and that will be pertinent to our budget workshop as well. So with that, Dr. Flores, you have an intro here? Okay. And with that, Ms. Jenny?
Sorry. My mic wasn't on, so I'm going to turn this over to Jenny and Mark Kanya.
Thank you, sir. At Trustee Weir's request, I joined her in a meeting with Council Member Jimmy Flanagan with the City of Austin because we were interested in taking a look at the message board that the city uses. And so through that, we've just explored technically what we could do to replicate something like that. So we're here to answer questions. I think Trustee Weir might have some more information in terms of why she feels that would be valuable.
So this is a workshop. I'm open to be a little more preface. Would you like to?
I typed up my notes. I don't know if anybody read them.
I scanned through them. But I was hoping to get more detail from you real quick. Just the purpose. Would you get for all of us again recap and for the public what this your basis for
so
this?
the City of Austin has a message board that they use. So when we did, those of us that are new did our open meetings training, they mentioned it. So it's basically an open meeting just running. So our same rules would apply to privacy and all of that. It is just like it's an open meeting where board members can actually have a discussion online and the public can see it. And so when Jenny and I met with Council Member Flanagan, we were asking if he had any negative experiences, had they had any pushback. He said absolutely not. That there weren't any negative feedback that they've gotten. It's all been positive. No public pushback. None from the staff. This is there. It is the Austin message board.
And the public can see all of this.
Public can see all of it.
But there's no comment from the public.
Public cannot comment on it. At all. It is just like us up here. It is literally an open meeting that's sort of running in real time. And they leave theirs up forever. I know Doug found that you can pull it down after 6 months, but just to save staff time, city leaves it up. And then no one has to monitor it because the only people that can post to it are the people that are sitting here.
Oh, sorry, Mason, do you have your...
No, go ahead.
I don't want to... I guess I'll be very honest, my concerns. I'm just going to jump right into it.
Yeah.
The City of Austin City Council is a full-time job. They make $76,000. They have a staff, and actually I looked at the rules around this City of Austin last night, and their staff's allowed to post on behalf of the person as well. We don't have a staff, and we're not full-time jobs. And
right.
So I think this might have good intent, but I wonder if in practice how realistic it is. I think it seems like we already are. We meet a good amount. I think it's good. I think the best conversations for public happen in a public setting such as this. I think also the best conversations for us as individual board members to have is face-to-face, if possible. If not, take a message over the phone, not through a keyboard. And so that's my concern. One of my concerns of where this would go is that it becomes a place where I'm not going to call you. Instead, I'm just going to go to the message board and post. When really probably a phone call would be better. And again, it goes back to another concern is just that I know Steve travels for work. Nikki during sessions is very busy. I travel some for work. Everyone here has, we talked about earlier, other obligations and commitments. Again, the city council is a full-time paid position. This is not. So they should be checking this on a regular basis. They should be looking at this and commenting because that is their paid job. And so I think like it's become something that I don't know if all of us would have the ability to really participate on a regular basis, because we plan on participating and doing our homework for our regular meetings and our workshops. So I think the intent's good. I just don't really know how this really impacts governance.
I love it. I love it because I don't have to worry about quorum. I can post, when I send questions, I would love for all of you to see those questions. But, it takes time. It doesn't, it's just, and then not just us to see the questions. I'm happy that everyone gets to see questions. And I just think it promotes transparency. It promotes more communication between our board. I mean, I see your point that, it would take more time. But for me, I think it's worth it.
I just don't see any safeguards to prevent this from becoming a rumor mill, quite frankly.
But it wouldn't be. But there are safeguards because it's just us, right? And so if you look.
But let's be honest. A lot of times just because we've seen it, and also I'm thinking not just this board, but a board 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, of someone on there not thinking properly and saying, I heard this today, and then they post it on there for
our
everyone
same
to
rules
share.
apply, though. It is an open meeting, so our same rules would apply. So you're not going to talk about personnel. You're not going to talk about.
We can enforce those rules in a public meeting. You can't enforce those rules if somebody just goes and posts it. You go, whoa, you can't say that.
Can you moderate it? If there's anything.
But it's my understanding you can't delete anything once it's posted on there, right?
That would be a public records, so that would be a legal question. I
It
don't
has to
believe
stay
we
on
could.
there for a minimum of
6
60
months.
days.
6 months.
Really?
And
Yeah.
I would say if we moderate, then at what Trustee Ware is talking about, it doesn't require really much staff time. We would build the tool and it would just live there. But if we're talking about moderating it,
No, I was going to say only
Oh,
moderate
the
for.
communication, you're right, has to be displayed 30 days, but then they have to keep it for open records for 60 days. Sorry.
No, the reason I was saying about moderating, meaning if there was anything that was personnel or student related that accidentally got put on there, and then that way you could.
I think we would definitely need a training on what should and shouldn't be posted, but I think that we could probably manage that, and just like we have to manage other rules that we have.
I'll tell you, one of my concerns that I have is, I love the transparency issue. I love the ability to communicate with greater ease, but kind of piggybacking on what Mason said, there could be an opportunity when several of people are online and chatting together back and forth, and 2 or 3 are not, and then a consensus is somewhat reached, and several board members aren't on at that particular moment. I know you can't take action items from this board and things like that, but if it's, if we've got another commitment, or Steve's driving back from wherever, and or whatever, I'm on an airplane, whatever, if somebody's not on the board at the message board at that moment, then they've now lost the opportunity to participate in that.
Can we click on one? Go to the, responding to
Portion
Alabama one. Or the resolution to boycott it. See, there was only 9, so a lot of people.
That's pretty contentious, so this should be interesting.
So, I think maybe in that case you would maybe have a deadline. We could have our own rules for when, if we're going to be talking about a topic at a meeting, this is the last date we post.
Will we know when someone else posts something? Will I be notified Corey
that-
Vessa has posted?
They don't do that in Austin, but we may have that option.
I just go back to the fact that the cities, they deal with environmental, economic development, transportation, safety and fire. They deal with a whole range of issues and they're dealing with really more, they're adopting resolutions on a regular basis to give staff directions at the city. We deal with the 4 walls of the schoolhouse. What we're dealing with is a lot narrower in scope. We touch a lot of different areas because we have a busing system, we do food services, we do mental health, we do a lot of stuff, but it's all within the 4 walls of the schoolhouse. And so that's where I feel like this is just.
Well, and I also think that 3/4 of our questions or our needs involve staff. And my understanding, staff, we're not going to burden staff with this, correct?
Right. Staff wouldn't have the ability to post on it, right?
Right. It would be that would happen the same way it happens now.
So we get a response back from staff over a question that maybe we've posted. Are we then
No,
gonna-
I don't think we would even I mean, see, I think if you look at kind of what they do, it'd be like when Mason, when we were going to talk about the bond, sale of bond, and Mason would maybe start a conversation. I would like for us to think about doing the competitive bid versus that. And then that would be it, right? And then you could maybe explain it to us. You could give us the detail. I mean, Amber could say, oh, that sounds interesting, but
But once again, we have no voice for the financial advisors that advise us because they're not going to be posting to it.
I think
That's kind of where I'm going with it. I see, like I said, I see a value, but I also see us very dependent upon and needing other ways to get our information from staff or from the expert that works on our bonds, giving your example. Like, I don't want to just hear Mason's side. I need to hear the financial advisor's side as well.
And that's a great point. I think also there could be some, just for example, tonight we're talking about the budget, some well-intentioned comment about somebody who says, well, based on my understanding, there's going to be a budget impact of this to the HB3. And that, again, no ill intent, but that's wrong. And so then staff can't chime in and say, hey, get with me, let me see your numbers, let's make sense, because that's not what we're getting. Now that's posted out there for the public, and they're going to take that as fact.
But they could come back in and then, let's say, CFO sees it and says that's wrong, calls you or whatever, and then you go and say, oh, got it clarified. And here's the link with the FAQs on it.
Yeah, but again, no, that's
You've
that's
already
time.
put information out there that's incorrect.
Well, I look at it as this is a growing district. We've got more complications, more.
Well, then that questions whether we should even be on Twitter, because I know what you're referring to. The run said 15.5 million. I put it out there. This is what the runs say. They were given to me. That was the knowledge that we had at that time. I've since spoken with Kenneth. There have been more comprehensive runs that give us a different number. Okay, guess what I'm going to post tonight? That exact thing, because the target moved. It wasn't like, but that doesn't mean that we should withhold information
That's
because
public information.
the
I
target
think
moved.
Jenny and Mark
Information.
maybe had
It's about
Had
getting the
a-
right information.
maybe an answer.
What do you want to try?
But then you post it and you think it's right, and it's not right.
And you can't take it back.
But
You can. I can go on Twitter and say, hey, guess what? Great news. There was additional runs. This is what we're actually going. This is like great news for us.
No, go.
You know?
So on a couple of these, this is obviously a trial run for us. So I could see this progressing as we go. So yes, it would be locked down to just the trustees being able to put on there. But should you decide that maybe a district rep like Jenny or whoever's designated be the spokesperson that says, okay, this is what legal says about this, or this is what our CFO says about this, we could add that person to be able to add comments to clarify if that's something that you wanted to have. A couple other things to answer one of the previous questions. Yes, you can subscribe under the system I've developed to a post. So that way, it's not like you have to go out there and look every time to see if there's any updates. You can say, I want to subscribe to this topic, and it'll email you every time somebody has made a post on it. And the other thing that also helps is it's searchable. So I realize the face-to-face is very helpful for you guys and important. But if you're looking for an opportunity to go back and look back at something that was talked about and you know it had a certain keyword, this would give you the ability to just search and find that topic and that discussion. So again, I'm not here to say that, yes, we should do this or what you shouldn't. I'm just here to give you a consult of the system that I developed and what it can and cannot do.
And there is that in the resolution in Austin. Just so you know, it says the city manager may authorize city staff to respond to questions or requests. And when we would do ours, we would just say superintendent instead of city manager.
so this is no cost, virtually no cost or minimal. Is that right? I mean, it's not like we're buying a piece of software. You're just adding
Correct.
Okay.
To develop the form, it's something that our website can currently support. But I would say I think the monitoring could take up a significant amount of staff time potentially.
I see it as a way to get answers before we're in the meeting. We can have many answers available to us, and then we can ask questions in here quicker. Just for instance, this topic right here. Is it something you can turn on? We can try it. Do we have to make a resolution? Do we have to vote on it? Can we do it?
I think we have to have a resolution. I mean, the city did.
Okay.
So
we're not doing anything tonight, though, on it. So
the last two comments I have is I haven't decided whether I'm for it or against it. Because there's nobody else in the state using it other than the city of Austin, right?
We would be the first school district.
Right.
I've only found one
So
other small town that uses it.
I'm all for being innovative, but that speaks volumes in this day of technology of why nobody else is doing this. That makes me wonder why. I don't know. I haven't done the research as to have other ISDs considered it and then not.
I know that Jimmy said if we do it, he's gonna push. He's hoping we'll be the first one.
Okay.
So that they can push Austin into doing it.
Austin ISD.
Austin ISD.
Not the city.
So then that goes on to, and we talked about this in our Team of 8 training, but we're also new on this board. 5 of us are 2.5 years or less, and still building the trust among us. And, that I think plays into this when we're going to start communicating when we're not face to face.
I think it would help to see where people are coming from before we get to the meetings on some of these things. Just for us to have had a conversation rather than, okay, I can't talk to too many people. I can only talk to 2 people, or I can only talk to, even if I want to get something on the agenda and I've got to ask one other person to get on the agenda, and then if I have 3, then it's 3 sending to a 4th, and that was a concern for you when I did that. And so I think this, even if it's just that, takes all of that away. You can see, you and Nikki can see, I would like to have this on the agenda, and then either 1 or 2 people chime in or they don't, and then we know.
This is just one of those things that's so it's just nothing like it out there. Besides Austin, no one else has done it. So there's just so many unknowns. And to me, it's kind of one of those things that you look at it, you study it, and you're like, this is dangerously close to really coming to a decision on a message board that, it's open, but it's not in a public setting. We're going to have a conversation later tonight about the budget, about police task force, and I just think the community is best served hearing their elected officials talk about that in a setting such as this versus reading them posting about it.
Well, I don't think it's going to do away. It's not going to do away with these. What Councilmember Flanagan said, actually, their meetings have become a lot more efficient and quicker because a lot of the background stuff has already happened.
I get it, and I think also, not to give we'll get to watch the meetings next week, but there's some policies that the PIP committee is going to be looking at to do just that. To try and make our meetings more efficient. There's some stuff we've been asking for all year. It hasn't happened, but we're going to try and put it in policy so we can start moving those things forward. And so I would hope that we could, at least at the committee level, then the board level, have those conversations and see how they go to try and make our meetings more efficient and more effective and even more valuable before we start going too far outside of what we already know.
What we're comfortable with. I guess this is really important to me. I've been talking about it since December because I do think it's transparency and it's trust and it's open, and I don't see how it's a bad thing. But I get that people have concerns. But I guess I would ask for us to do it for 6 months and then come back and evaluate.
I think it's worth giving it a try.
Yeah, and then come back and evaluate and say, okay, nobody used it, so do we really need it? Or it was whatever.
Yeah, I just wish we could do more to try and maybe flesh out some of the potential issues, because there are a lot of potential issues before we even give a trial run. That's my concern. Is let's try and get some clarity on some other things before we say, yeah, let's go do it and turn on without any real.
I guess clarity on what other things.
Yeah, I think we got to have. I want some more exact. I think someone said training about. Okay, this is what the Open Meetings Act says about these things. These are what's appropriate. This is what's not. We got to flesh out. Okay, if we did this, would we be like the city of Austin, where we would allow somebody to post on our behalf? Would we be allowing who on staff would be allowed to post or comment, or what other things would be needed? But then again, now his time is being taken up.
Well, no, the way their resolution read is it would have to be us. We don't have staff, so it would have to be us. And then the way their resolution reads is that, it's the use is restricted exclusively for them council members, and then such staff members of the city who have received special authorization, which would be their staff, which we don't have staff, and then the city manager can authorize city staff to respond. So that would be it.
So like in the example that Corey gave of her sending her questions, how would you see that being resolved on this message board? Would someone from staff respond to all of those questions? What if some of her questions contained, confidential
I think the way they do it,
information?
she would still send her questions the same way she does it.
It's just a matter of you have asked in the past, hey, I'd really like to have seen your questions because that spurred more questions for me to think about so we could have better, feed
more
off
like
of
what
each
we
other.
got back afterwards, where Corey might post, hey, in getting ready for this budget meeting, I asked these things, and this is what Kenneth said.
And this again, I go back to this. I want the pivot. I don't want to. And it's one of the policies that we're bringing up. We actually are trying to address that issue, try and get answers faster, and give more time for follow up. So I just want to.
But this is a whole nother issue too, though. I ran on transparency. Okay, I said, I would be utterly transparent, and that I wanted the district that I would push the district towards more transparency. This is totally in alignment with that goal, and I just feel like it's beyond even just yes. I think it helps so much with our being able to dialogue and not violate open meetings. I think it helps us to ask better questions and use each other as resources. But I also think it helps the community feel like that we are being transparent towards them and builds trust, which is a central goal of mine, is to build trust. And so that's part of why I'm so in favor of this, because
is this something we're not going to do any action on tonight, right? So
Right.
no action. Can we look at it next at our 20th meeting, the 20th, and either put a resolution, discuss it, and we'll have time to go through.
Please don't put anything else on the 20th meeting.
Could be real quick.
Oh, you're not going to be here, right?
We could do. You're not going to be here. Okay, we can do it anytime. But you're right. You're not going to be here on the 20th. But somewhere we can discuss it. So I don't want to. There's pros and cons for it. I understand. I just wanted you to give you a presentation. Is there anything else on this? We've got a lot of other
Did you want to
topics
show
to
us
discuss
what
this
it
evening.
looked, what your thing
What's
looked
that?
like?
Let's actually look at it.
Okay.
Sure, we should take a Mark.
So going back to several months ago, you guys had a presentation where you saw the ARC that Ryan Smith's department is using, and that's a platform that I developed for them, and they've done a beautiful job of populating it. And so I went back to the same thing. We're 1 in 4 school districts that uses WordPress, and it gives us a very inexpensive solution to do stuff like this. And so here's a page that looks like the rest of ours as far as the branding. It matches everything. It doesn't look like a free forum that you would find on the internet. So it looks like it belongs to Round Rock ISD. It's very simple in that I just put in a test forum that I started. That could be a subject like you saw in the Alabama one. And once you click on that, it tells the content, who posted it, when they posted it, okay? And then down below, here's the opportunity for whoever's logged in to do a reply. And there's infinite number of replies. Or, as a user, you would have the ability to start a new post on a totally different topic. And it's fairly simple. Here's the option to subscribe. So if you're saying, I want to know any time somebody puts up another post on this one, I want to know, you can click on subscribe to that. So again, it's just it's a very simple design so far. That's just a forum plugin that I put together, and very easy to use. Very much like the City of Austin one. Because it is on our platform, we could do more with like a front page if you wanted, a picture of the board and some legal verbiage about what it's being used for, and anything else that Lindsay and team would like to put up there that you guys feel is necessary. We can have a landing page that puts up all that information and then links to the forum. So it's highly customizable. Put up whatever you would like.
I have a question. What do you think about that? Can you mock that up, take some screenshots, give it to Dr. Flores, and put it, Dr. Jenny, give it to us, and send it to us so we can look at it? Don't want to make it live yet, but if you can mock it up with the legal, just like you said, pictures, whatever.
Oh, yeah, sure. Sure.
And then that way we'll have some time to look at it and review it, and then send us a link also with the Austin one as well. I think I've seen it, but I'd have to go back and search for it again.
Yeah, they have their forum, and this is again what a forum looks like, where it tells you how many times it's been viewed and how many replies there are. But this is their first page, where they have the opportunity to give you some information. It's very basic. We can do whatever you want, and I am of course willing to meet with Trustee Ware or whoever you would like to sit down with the product and actually see how it works, and train and do whatever it is that helps you guys make a educated decision on it. And also, as Jenny said, this is a free solution. We pay an annual fee for WordPress for our district website, our campus websites, our department websites. This is just another site that I've built, so it goes underneath the same thing. It's Amazon Web Server service, so it's secure, it's stable.
Okay. So again, if you can put a few bullets, whatever,
Sure.
maybe a page or so, half a page of bullets in there. I think you had a click.
Yeah, just real quick. Oh, sorry. I mean, Corey, we're all for transparency. We all want to be transparent on what we're talking about, what we're doing. Everybody wants that. And honestly, I think Veronica IC does a really good job of being transparent. I think you look at the way we've handled, the PD task force. You look at what we did with the bond, look at what we've done with everything else. Our meetings, our community meetings being live streamed on Facebook or put on the web. We do a lot for transparency. Now, I know some people have a different definition of transparency, and that's okay. Everyone has a different one. My opinion, though, of this, I haven't been convinced yet that this is nothing more than to give the appearance of transparency, but it's not really true. It's not really transparency. That's just the way. Yeah. I think it's really just because it all comes down to how it gets used. And if some of us are going to be really good about using it and others aren't comfortable using it for either one reason, either because they feel like it's too much in the gray or because they travel too much, spend a lot of time on planes or in automobiles, and they just don't post as much, that doesn't mean that anyone's being less transparent or more transparent. It just means that these are part-time jobs that we don't get salary for, unlike city council members.
Right.
And so that then again goes back to, it's not really transparency. It's transparency for the people that use it, and everyone else is then going to get accused of not being transparent in reality. It's they have a life. They have lives. They got to go deal with those and look forward to having conversations like this at these scheduled meetings.
No, part of the thing
I can be convinced, but
I think I have one more thing. I want to be quick, and I really appreciate you coming, Mark. But Doug, at one point you had said you were encouraging this because of the new open meetings.
Just very briefly, without getting into too much legal detail, there was a case that involving the conviction of some board members that was overturned by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which led the legislature to have to revise the definition of a meeting. And previously it was defined as a meeting in person, but then they've now added written communications. And so it's going to be a new law that will be implemented, this September. and we will all together learn how it'll be interpreted going forward, depending on what cases go before courts and what the Attorney General issues in terms of opinions, interpretive opinions. So in light of those kinds of things, this has already been in existence in the Open Meetings Act for several years. It is true that it is not widely used by any stretch, but considering that this board has expressed times that it wish it could communicate board-wide without having to wait for a meeting, this is an option that the law provides.
Because it may be, I don't know if it's going to come this same way, but it almost looks like with the new law, one email to all of us may be in violation under the new law, which that will definitely impact us. So this would get us past that. And I know, I'm sorry, it's 7:51.
That's all right. I know we got a lot to cover tonight, and I appreciate the input. We're supposed to be 5 or 10 minutes, and it wasn't. We had a lot of questions, a lot of good dialogue. We're not making any action on it tonight. It's not going to go live. Whatever you can send us, Doug, if you have any links to this new law and maybe one or two sentences, you got to be careful about this. We think it's going to be that'll help us make a decision going forward.
Thank you for all your work.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you putting it together. All right. Next up, we'll go back to go to agenda item D1, award of by-board proposal for bond project for playground and shade structure, phase 2 at multiple campuses. Dr. Flores.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We have Terry Wooster's not here, but we have someone in his place, and we're ready to turn it to Dr. Addix, who will turn it over.
So David is here, and he's going to handle this item for us.
Do you have any questions?
I love that. That's a great presentation. With that, you've laid it all out here for all these playgrounds. It sounds like any company that calls themselves Fun Abounds. It's got to be We Build Fun. That's another one. So anyway, Ms. Vessa.
So did the school personnel get to talk to you a little bit about what they wanted in the play structure, or is that determined by policies and whatnot?
The school personnel was included in email conversations. I was not included in those conversations. We have a project manager that is handling this, working in the construction department. But they did have some input. The structure themselves are going to have, the needed activities on each structure to make them fully accessible, fully usable for some of these. You'll notice are getting just one bigger playground when we get through instead of having two smaller playgrounds, and so it'll be accessible and usable for K through 5 all the way for everyone on one playground. But yes, they did have some input. We met with we communicated with some principals or with the principals for these campuses. It's only 5 campuses this summer, so.
So they'll be ready to go for when school begins again in August?
That is the goal. We have contractors just waiting.
That's why this item is tonight.
Yes, they're just waiting to go. You approved the Phase 1 last month, and that allowed them to get the equipment ordered. The equipment is ready to go, and they're calling us every day. Can we get started before? No, you can't do that. So give us till Thursday night.
Mr. President, I move that the board approve the use of $1,166,639 of Bond 2018 funds for playground and shade structure projects, Phase 2, at multiple campuses as presented.
Second.
And a motion, a second, for funds for playgrounds and shades as presented. Any further discussion?
I'm super excited about this one.
Okay, great.
Me too.
Anytime recess. So anyway, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries unanimous. Great. Thank you, Mr. Hodebeck. All right, we'll go to agenda item E1, legislative update. Back to you, Ms. Caputo. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'm going to ask Marty De Leon to join me, and I just wanted to personally thank Marty for all his hard work this legislative session for Round Rock ISD and for keeping us informed, and he's going to give us a wrap-up of the session.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Board President, Dr. Flores, board members. Any questions? I would like to bring my colleague, MJ Nicchio, to the podium. He was also, he's part of our law firm, and he was very instrumental, too, in a lot of the pieces of legislation that we're going to talk about very quickly. I do want to have some opening remarks. This session, it's always, I'm reminded of the great American poet that once said that the session is like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. This session had everything, and hopefully something for everyone. And I broke
Just
it already.
hit the page down button on there.
Page
Does that
down.
work?
I'm paging down.
Yeah. Where's our chief technologist?
So I'll just tell you off the top of my head what it is.
That's what lawyers do.
I swear I didn't do it.
Next.
Can you take that thumb drive out? Will the keyboard work then? USB?
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll use the... okay. Thank you, Patty. Very quickly, this is a quick overview of how the session started. If you recall, we had last year, there was this esteemed commission put together to look at school finance. So House Bill 3, as everyone knows, passed, and we're going into uncharted territory. This is the first time the legislature has passed a school finance bill without a court order, and that's significant. It was also helpful that the stars aligned. There was more money in the budget. The comptroller said we have over $9 billion for the next biennium. And there was a shift in the chambers. There was more Democrats in the House. There was a couple more Democrats in the Senate. So, again, the stars aligned for House Bill 3. Here's a quick overview of what the House Bill 1 looks like, but mainly what Article 3, the education budget, looks like. And you got to think about this. This is an astronomical number. Our budget is $250 billion. I mean, Texas has the economy of really, one of the 10 largest countries in the world. It's massive. And I just gave you a glimpse of some of the high-ticket items that are in Article 3. The last three, I think, are of note for this district. So we're going to be talking about House Bill 3 and the revenue that's generated that's going to be coming to the school district. But outside of the school finance formulas, there's other budget riders where we can tweak to direct that money to come to the school district. I know AP is a big program here, on-ramps. You guys are also, I think, are a blended learning grant recipient from Raise Your Hand. There is a lot of money that's not necessarily in the formulas, but it's also here as well that we'll be able to see in the coming school year. Oh, by the way, please stop me if you have any questions. I put together a lot of these slides, and I err on the side of more information is better, and then we will pick out nuggets where we see them. Now, here's the nugget in this slide is both the House and Senate plans started out with $9 billion. This is, it was like The Price is Right. It was like having two showcases where both the House and Senate are committed to putting more money into public schools. I make these references because I've been doing this 20 years. We've never seen this level of commitment. And what the final version is, it's $11.6 billion. And they went higher than what they had proposed in the beginning of the session. And you recall, we had the teacher salary compensation issue percolate throughout the whole entire session. and it ended up becoming a more egalitarian approach to providing more money for our teachers and other educators. And as you can see, the basic allotment went up. I'm going to talk to Kenneth or ask Kenneth to weigh in on some of that basic allotment and what it really means shortly. Again, just another slide that talks about some of the big items in House Bill 3. I think the one thing I would want to bring to your attention is the last bullet on the right-hand side where it talks about the repeals. The high school allotment, the GT allotment, these are all allotments you were getting on top of the basic allotment. It wasn't just $5,140. You were getting more. And so those items were repealed. So while there's a significant increase in the basic allotment, it's largely due because of these repealers. One of the best items on this slide is the 8 golden pennies. In the previous school finance world that we lived in, it was only 6. More golden pennies means the state's going to start supplementing these pennies when districts go out for our TRE. And there's still a lot to be decided, and I'm going to defer to your CFO on what it really means locally for you.
They'll supplement or supplant?
It'll supplement. It'll for those that aren't able to reach a certain yield, the state puts in. And so it just depends on where you are geographically in the state and what your yield is generating. Another wrinkle in school finance is the property value growth. It's going to be capped at 2.5%. The whole session was about 2 things: school finance and property tax relief. Lawmakers, the top 3, the governor, lieutenant governor, and the speaker, were committed to providing property tax relief. And in fact, if you go back to this slide here, look at the property tax relief that they started out with, the House and Senate plan. It was $2.7 billion. It was a modest figure by all accounts. And in the final version, it doubles. Property tax relief won the day. And in fact, it got almost as much money as school finance, but slightly more. Here's some important provisions that, just a collection. This bill is over 300 pages. And for the sake of time, I've just identified a handful. There was a lot of talk about how charters get the statewide average. They get more money than the traditional school student, the traditional ISD student. Well, now going forward, charters will have to pay into TRS, which will somewhat level the playing field. And then we're going to talk about salaries shortly, but every district is under this mandate. With the new revenue that you're getting, 30% has to be allocated for teachers. And the takeaway on this slide is probably, I would say, the last bullet. Not much has been said about the efficiency audit, but for those districts that are considering a TRE, you're going to have to do this efficiency audit. I think that's understood. But you'll want to do that efficiency audit way before the time that the board actually decides to do the TRE, so that you show voters that we implemented all these provisions, all these recommendations per the audit. We are still in need of more revenue, and hence the TRE. The more things change, the more they stay the same. They collapsed a lot of allotments, but they also added new allotments. For the first time, students identified dyslexic will receive a weight. For those districts that have New Tech and P-Tech programs, there's going to be more money tied to those students. There is a good amount of money set aside for dropout recovery. That's an important population that has not really been addressed in previous school finance bills. The Comp Ed allotment, probably one of the best changes they did was to expand the uses, or rather the range of students that could be eligible. They've started down this road of looking at the census of where the child lives. We're going to need more guidance on who qualifies in these 5 bifurcated tiers in the comp ed allotment. Bilingual ed is seeing a revival, if you will. Now students that are in dual language, dual immersion programs are going to get a weight. Lawmakers have seen the value of students who know more than one language, and so that's what's reflected. Special ed, there are over a dozen different weights in special ed. It's close to impossible to update all of them, so they split the baby and said the mainstream weight, which is applicable to all students across the state, let's increase that weight. Everybody benefits from special ed, and that's a good weight. So no complaints there. CTE, if you're having any CTE courses that are taught at the middle school level, these are the principles of the beginning courses of CTE and tech apps. For your high school that are having computer science 1 and 2 and 3, web design, video game design, these tech apps courses are finally going to get the same weight that a traditional career and tech course gets. So you're going to see more revenue from those students in those classes. And it's no longer a competition between the tech apps community and the career and tech community. There's an optional teacher incentive allotment. I think they borrowed a lot of the language from the Dallas ACE program. It remains to be seen that there's going to have to be guidance on this issue from the commissioner. But nonetheless, probably my favorite bullet on this slide too is the transportation allotment. For the first time in a while, Chapter 41 districts will actually get funding for transportation. And I didn't put this on there, but if you're transporting students to the early college high school, taking dual credit courses, you will get funding for those students as well. So keep in mind, the basic allotment is this figure on steroids. It's $6,160. It is fantastic, but they took a lot of it from these current allotments that you were enjoying, and so it's a savings. And I put that in quote of $5 billion to the state, but they just put that back in to the basic allotment. One big question I get asked all the time is, now that we know that the school finance bill cost $11.6 billion, I told you in one slide that the comptroller said we have $9 billion more, and the total price tag for House Bill 3 is 11.6. So I think we're a little short. This isn't something that I just discovered. I think it's apparent, but lawmakers seem convinced that we're going to have enough money in general revenue to cover that balance that I have there in red. There's that Wayfair decision. I don't know if you know anything about that, but you may have seen the news reports that Amazon and eBay and those types of companies that they don't have a physical presence in Texas. Well, now the state can require them to remit sales taxes, which will generate about $500 million in a couple of years. So it'll be a while. But anyway, the price tag, the bottom bullet on the left-hand side, is the most important thing. 2 years from now, House Bill 3 is going to cost $13 billion. Well, we'll worry about that later, right? We'll kick that can and we'll address it when we get it, when we see it. If you recall, the board together we came together and we drafted these priorities, and I just wanted to update you on how we did on those priorities. I thought we did pretty good this session, trying to address as many things as we did. It was pretty comprehensive, your list of priorities. And let me move to the next slide as well. So this encompasses all the priorities that we had talked about. And, I think there was value in all these priorities. And with MJ's help, we were able to move the needle on a lot of these issues. The one that stands out on this slide is the completion of CTE, coherent sequence. you have students that will take a sequence of CTE courses, and for now, you're getting half a point in A through F in your rating. It is going to be phased out. For those students that are taking those sequences of courses, you will not get any points for them. And the commissioner feels strongly about college readiness, and he has marginalized the value of CTE courses. So we tried on at least on 5 different bills to get this issue across the goal line, but we were not successful. But other than that, I thought, like I said, we had a pretty good session. Very quickly, Senate Bill 213 allows those students who have not passed all 5 end-of-course exams to continue to get a Round Rock diploma, provided they meet certain criteria established by the committee, the graduation committee. For our students that are in 3rd grade and 6th grade, they should be celebrating right now for 3906 because they don't have to do star writing 4th and 7th grade. They decided to take those components and put it into the reading exams to measure the TEKS with regard to writing. For our high-performing students that want to take Algebra 1 and Geometry at the same time, they can now. Or for our students that are struggling, freshmen across the state struggle with Algebra 1. They'll matriculate as a sophomore, but their high school program doesn't allow them to take Algebra 1 and Geometry at the same time to stay with their cohort. This bill now says that they can. Senate Bill 1476, for all of our departing employees this school year, if any of them have been investigated, the superintendent is required to report to SBEC, I investigated MJ Nicchio 5 years ago. The allegations proved false, but I'm reporting like I'm supposed to. Well, now we remove that requirement if the investigation yielded nothing. And what's important about that is departing employees, if you have to report, if Dr. Flores has to report MJ to SBEC, it almost represents a scarlet letter on that person's file going to that next job. I think that was a hindrance for many. 1525, as I mentioned, I have here 300. It's going to be 300 million this coming next school year, but it'll jump to 500 million in 2 years. For our employees that are retired or going to retire, they did make a significant investment into TRS pension and TRS care. So retired teachers, for example, are going to get a 13th check, which is going to be helpful since most deductibles are $1,500. But I call this bill share the pain. Everybody's going to be contributing more towards TRS. For governance, human trafficking is a big problem in our state, and lawmakers passed a new law that says we'd like to have you do at least 1 hour of training on the issue of human trafficking. I'll just go through these real quick. Senate Bill 1640. I actually asked my brother Doug for input on this because this was the open meet. This was the walking quorum bill, and the walking quorum was struck down by the Supreme Court, the Texas Supreme Court. So lawmakers wanted to clean that up, but we wanted to make sure that communication between trustees that are less than a quorum is not a violation, and so we were able to address that. Bonds are going to look a little different. The bond ballot is going to look a little different. If you're going to do one for a stadium, an auditorium, it's got to be a single issue now. If the district wants to build a new stadium, the only thing that can be on that ballot is the stadium. 440 says that if you have any unspent bond proceeds, you have to have this public meeting to say how you're going to spend the unspent bond proceeds. And 477 tweaks the bond ballot. You still have to provide the general description. You still have to provide the amount, the principal amount, and then principal and interest necessary to pay off that bond. Senate Bill 11, the school safety. So school finance, property tax relief were the two hottest issues, and school safety was a close third. In light of Santa Fe, lawmakers wanted to do something, and so Senate Bill 11 has a litany of things. There is a school safety allotment. It's unclear as to if they're referencing another pot of money. I believe they are, because I just asked the agency, besides Senate Bill 500, which set aside $100 million for hardening our schools, is there any other money? And they said no. But Senate Bill 11 gives you some wiggle room to spend money on mental health professionals if that's where the district would like to spend its money. Here's Senate Bill 500. With Dr. Presley's help, I added a couple of items, two-way radios and fencing, and actually Trustee Moses was also helpful in adding to this list, because when we first started Senate Bill 500, it only had the first 4 items. And so we were able to tweak it, because if it was going to be a hard and fast list, I wanted to give the district more flexibility. So it remains to be seen how this money is going to be doled out. $100 million divided by 5.4 million students is going to translate, and my rough math is like $18.50. But if you multiply, let's say $18.50 times the number of students here, we'll just round up to 50,000. You're looking at over $900,000 for school safety. Here are some of the bills that did not pass. The graveyard is deep, but I only identified a few just for the sake of efficiency. But Senate Bill 29 garnered a lot of attention. Cities and counties, lawmakers just really struggled with the input that they get from cities and counties, and so they tried to limit their advocacy, but it didn't work. Just to tell you how hard the session is, and every session, if you look at the column, it says 14%. 14 out of every 100 bills makes it to the governor's desk. That is a low number. It is very difficult to pass legislation, and maybe that was the design, the original design. But nonetheless, this process is complicated and not an easy thing to do. So going back to our scorecard, I think we should. I think the scorecard is very positive in light of these stats. And I think that's it. That's my last slide.
Ms. Bessa.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you for all your work. It's a pleasure working with you as we navigated this session. I do have a couple questions just about your presentation. If we could go back to the teacher pay, and there's been a lot of confusion over this, and I just want to clarify, because a lot of people think it's 30% of the increase in the basic allotment, that is what you have a school district would have to devote towards teacher pay. Is that correct? Or is it 30% of the additional funds, M&O funds, that we receive from the state?
So I'm going to give you 2 answers, and then I'm going to ask your CFO to weigh in. So the bill, as written, says 30% of the increase in the basic allotment. Mm-hmm. It's on its face, that's what it says. But you have to take in account the rest of the bill and the rest of the provisions. And that's why I put it in red. It's the revenue to the total revenue to the school district, and not specifically the basic allotment. Did I get that right, MJ? So it's misleading, because I think the LBB runs, if you look at them on its face, the LBB runs say 30% of the increase in your basic allotment means teachers will get X. And so you kind of alluded to it earlier in the meeting about there was comprehensive runs that were done. And I'm going to ask your CFO if he could weigh in about what it really means, because we can talk till we're blue in the face about what the actual language says in House Bill 3, word for word, but really in practicality, what does it really mean? So, Kenneth, do you mind weighing in?
We looked at the language yesterday with Rosanna and Wayne. Literally, hey, all three of us around the table read the same thing, and our bottom line takeaway was that it means what is our incremental revenue, and our incremental revenue, round numbers, is $24 million. So if we've got to spend 24% or 30% of $24 million, that's $7.2 million. Well, with the board increase, with the board's approval of the 3.5% raise, that was $14.8 million, so roughly $15 million. They also consider compensation any contribution that you do toward medical insurance. Well, we're doing $2 million toward that. So really, as a district, we've put $16.8 million in toward additional compensation of the $24 million that we're getting. So we're way over. I mean, everything, I believe, we're well over the requirement of the 30%.
Thank you. I have one more question about compensation. So in that language, it talks about focusing those increases in compensation towards teachers that with 5 or more years of experience. How mandatory is that? Like, do we have to do that? Is that like just a suggestion, or is it part of? Or are we legally bound to create a policy or for salary increases that proportionally benefit teachers with more experience?
That's a good question. So you can look at it, again, I have two answers for everything. The one way of looking at it, and if you want to do it this way, and again, it's just a suggestion. It's not actually not a suggestion. I'm just going to spit it out. For those teachers that are, let's say, they have 5 years or more experience, with the money that the revenue gain that you did receive, you could pay them $1 more than those teachers with less than 5 years experience. That is, you're given priority, legally speaking, to those teachers that have more experience. You could give them $1 more. The second answer is you have discretion on what that looks like.
So are you saying that, though indeed we do have to at least give teachers with 5 or more years of experience at least 1 penny or whatever more than the raise that of teachers of less than 5 legally?
To avoid a challenge, I would say yes. In our experience, we're talking even now as the dust is settling. We are, listening to the other associations, the teacher associations. They are holding their breath on what each district is going to do with that provision that you are referencing, and this will come down perhaps to a court challenge. If you do that $1, for example, is that in the spirit of the law, or did you violate the spirit of the law? But again, you have discretion. They didn't want to micromanage too much. They did micromanage in the sense of the revenue you're going to see, the increased revenue, 30% has to go to these 4 groups, these 4 classes. And inside that one class of classroom teachers, please consider. But they wrote it in such a squishy kind of way. It's with priority given to those classroom teachers with 5 years or more experience. Their goal was to reward those teachers, to provide some retention, positive consequence.
So based on that, Kenneth, is our compensation model that we approved at the last meeting in compliance with the new law? Do we give priority towards teachers with 5 or more years of experience?
Well, I'm going to kick the can to a net, because literally, like what we've got on our published pay table is, the step schedule increments up by year of service, but there was, like when the board gave the 3.5% raise and we did the equity adjustments, all that sort of thing, there was no separate math that said, well, because when we were doing that, they hadn't tapped the gavel on this. So short answer is there's nothing, a separate set of math from what's in the pay table right now.
So legally, Marty, do you think that we need to revisit our vote and alter it maybe a bit so that we can be in compliance with the law as you see it? Or do you think we get a year off? Because many people...
You don't get a year off. This bill is effective now. And, so the law is, I don't want to say necessarily in the eye of the beholder, but the language... It could be $100. It could be $1,000. There could still be a legal challenge to say that's not enough priority. You did not show us. If a teacher says this district should have given us $5,000, I think the court will defer because the language is not perfect, and it gives districts that discretion, I believe. So it would have been nice if they had said something a little bit more, provide more specificity. But without looking at the final picture of what you have done for those teachers with more than 5 years experience, it's hard to say legally you're in compliance and you're not going to be subject to a legal challenge. You can grieve anything.
Mr. Moses.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just real quick, and I was curious as I'm outside the compensation also, and what all counts as far as that 30% of salary and benefits. But is there anything else that counts for either whether that be stipends or any type of incentive bonuses or payments or things like that, or is it pretty cut and dry?
So it goes on to the intent, the legislative intent, even the language says that compensation is broad. So it encompasses more than just salary. Mm-hmm. So the district would be, and again, they were trying to give districts flexibility in that respect.
I'm just trying to think. I mean, it's a good year this year, and hopefully a good year next year. But I also know that we're kind of foolish to think that there won't be some lean years in the future. So trying to already think down the road, get creative of what might fit within the law.
There's been some newspaper articles, and even I think the lieutenant governor has said, the teachers, our classroom teachers are going to get an average of $4,000 more in their compensation. It's going to be district to district. I don't think that's a safe number that anyone can rely on, but he put that out there. And now the question is, when this district or any district adopts a compensation package, I don't see my $4,000.
I don't see Dan Patrick sitting up here either.
Did you want to, Annette, respond to the previous question about whether we had shown in compliance with the legislative intent that teachers with more than 5 years of experience got an additional salary increase?
Sure. Since we had already adopted our compensation plan, that was one of our questions right away to Cindy Clegg. Oh my goodness, are we in compliance? Are we okay? And in her own words, she said, nobody knows for sure what that means exactly and what that requirement's going to mean. But with us already by virtue, of course they make more money because of the salary schedule itself, but our model gave higher pay raises to years 1 through 10 in order to move our starting salary up to begin with. Is it going to be enough? I mean, we're kind of hoping so. She said that one of her attorneys say that any amount of pay raise that's larger for teachers with 5 years or more than teachers with less than 5 years is in compliance. But like she said, it's kind of left up to interpretation, and we're kind of waiting. Everyone's waiting. All of our HR connections that we have and emails that go back and forth, we're all kind of waiting to see what TEA is going to say and kind of give us some more guidance. So we're kind of all in hold.
So if that's the case and that is applicable this year, could that mean how do we even do that? Like, how do we we have to vote on a budget on June 20th, and we don't have TEA
Right.
guidance as to what's in compliance with the law. That puts us in a real bind.
Well, and like she kind of said in the end too, that they don't think that this is going to come anytime soon. So everybody just kind of moving forward and doing what they can. And then if something comes down, then I guess we're going to have to all deal with it. But worst case scenario, we may have to add money. But right now, we feel like we're in a safe place for what we know.
Okay, any other questions?
I had a
Sure.
totally. Is everyone done though with that topic? I don't want to jump in and because one thing that you didn't mention that got signed today was House Bill 18. And I guess I was just curious. I mean, I had the Statesman thing, and then it was on the news right before I came. But it said school districts were going to have to implement plans for the counseling program. Oh, sorry. It's about implementing. And the Statesman article just said, real quick, school districts' improvement plans to include implementation of a comprehensive school counseling program, more training for teachers, counselors, and principals on mental health. And then there was also, I guess, there's going to be a hub, like Dell's going to be a hub for mental health. And I just didn't know if you had any more clarification on that other than what was in the Statesman.
So just to clarify, I believe this bill is targeting those campuses that are IR, and you have to submit as part of your improvement required a school improvement plan. And as part of that school improvement plan, so much of the focus is on the academics of why the school got the IR rating. And this bill was designed to, well, let's look at other wraparound services. Let's look at holistically what's happening at this school. And so the school improvement plan has to incorporate those counseling initiatives.
So it's not for everybody. It's just.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Bessa.
So back on this, the slide that talks about the CCMR, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Is it this slide?
Yes.
So the commission, the Public School Finance Commission that met for a whole year, a lot of the talk was, why don't we incentivize third grade reading, third grade math, eighth grade reading, eighth grade math, and of course high school, our high school students. So it was a broad range of incentives that the commission said, this is going to redefine schools and outcomes, and we need to, have some performance money tied to outcomes. What they ended up with was this CCMR.
Just for clarification, college, career, and
Military readiness. So far, from what I understand, the CCMR is about students who do well on the TSIA assessment, AP, IB, college prep math, those kinds of courses. And if you reach a certain level, you are considered college ready or career ready. In the military, there is the ASVAB test that you have to qualify to join the military. So the goal is, so they moved away from third grade reading because it was, I think they heard your concerns that having an 8-year-old, that's a lot of pressure for that 8-year-old to start thinking about how much money could be generated if I do well on third grade STAR. And so that was, so they came up with these figures. I think there's no rhyme or reason, but they wanted to have our high school kids have incentive, or rather our high schools to have that incentive.
Isn't it true though, like that you have to be in the top 25%? Like it's not just. Wasn't there more to it? I thought it was something about being like in the top quartile of your cohort, school cohort, the students that performed there, then they got this. It's not just everybody in the district that meets that standard.
It may have been in one of the iterations of House Bill 3 on the Senate side. But I do recall this provision saying at the bottom, the commissioner will adopt rules on this subject.
Ms. Feller.
So on slide 13, I have a question about the optional teacher incentive allotment. Can you tell me a little bit more about, does the district have to opt into that? Can teachers individually opt into it? What does recognized as exemplary master mean? A little more about that, because I think some teachers could be watching this and saying, wow, I could get up to $32,000 more a year. Tell me, show me the money. How do I do it?
Another great question, and the same provision that is applicable to the CCMR. There's a provision that says the commissioner will adopt rules on this topic and what it means and how districts can opt in. So he has his homework cut out for him. But I think, again, this was another recommendation from the commission, and I think they're borrowing a lot from the Dallas ACE model.
Is he given a timeline? Like when he has to have this done? I can't remember. Refresh my memory.
It's effective now, and
but
so
with the rulemaking authority,
the rulemaking it is
open-ended kind of.
It's kind of open-ended.
How does the state budget for something? I mean, that's a significant amount of money, and I think teachers are going to say, if there's a way I can make more money, I'm going to want to do it. So how does the state plan for that and say, we've got X number of teachers in the state? Is it capped at, we don't have any specifics on it at all? Or we capped at the first 10,000 teachers that apply for? That's a significant amount of money.
Dr. Flores is, I look to you, but you've been doing this a long time, but we used to have this career ladder. We've had DATE. We've had TEAG. These are acronyms for other teacher performance pay programs that have gone the way of the dodo. They just ran out of money. And Dallas will tell you, the superintendent will tell you at Dallas, this program is not sustainable. This ACE model that I referenced, it's not sustainable at Dallas ISD. He doesn't know how he's going to be able to continue that program, but this was before House Bill 3 passed. But it's a very good question. I think if you go back to my original, one of the slides where I said that this bill costs $11.6 billion and there's a balance left over, I'm not sure how they're going to be able to sustain this program either.
Okay. It really stood out to me because, we can all agree that we don't pay our teachers enough and there's not enough money, and there's not a whole lot of ways in education to make more money once you get in without going to the next level of administration or something like that. So I love the option that there is a way to compensate our teachers who are really doing well according to whatever these standards are, but I hope they find the money.
Mr. Moses?
I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say the commissioner rules, we'll wait for those, but also knowing that it's going to be tied to, obviously, testing and other things like that. A lot of districts are hesitant. Dallas has had that model, but even before it was ACE, having been employed there, they had several indices that they utilized for teacher effectiveness. They call that the classroom effectiveness indices, and so that's been a model that took them a long time. And not only did it take a long time, but it's something that teachers understood this is forthcoming. So they've worked with that. It's been a continual process. We're going to wait on that until we get a lot more clarity. And then secondly, how tied that is to teacher performance or student performance is always something that teachers, they'll say, wait a minute, before you venture too fast and too far into that, we want no part of it. We don't know that yet at this point, but obviously we stand ready to do what is necessary. And obviously there's not going to be all that much money in that if it's a statewide initiative that people say, hey, we really want to do this in these districts. So we'll just wait on that.
Okay, anything else for now on that? Okay, you're always available if we have questions to call you directly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. All right, let's go to agenda item E3. This one will be, E2. You want to go, there you are. Okay. I'm looking over there. So.
Yeah, I got
Okay.
confused too. What was
So, good evening, President Chadwell, members of the board, and Dr. Flores. I'm going to update you tonight with the latest budget numbers. Marty gave you a lot of the background on what came out of the legislative session, so sort of the intent of this on the revenue side is to say, kind of like bottom line, what does it mean for us, and how does all of this sort of narrative translate into a number that we have in our budget. I included, like, in your board docs, you have not only the numbers that are up on the screen, but also a narrative that has information line by line, kind of gives you some verbiage about what's embedded in each one of these numbers as well. So starting off with number one on the current year tax collections, one of the big fundamental changes that passed with House Bill 3 was compressing the tax rate. So our current tax rate that we're at on the M&O side of $1.04 will go down 7 cents to 97 cents. So you see even though our property values are increasing $2.1 billion, 5.7%, the reason that current year tax collections budget to budget actually decrease is because of the 7 cent decrease in the tax rate. In terms of, and I'm not going to hit every line number, but I'll hit ones with major changes to it. On number 4, with other local revenue, the increase there is, most of that is driven by higher interest rates, so our investment income is budgeted to be higher than it was in the year that we're currently living. Then with state revenue on line item 5, with House Bill 3, you had the biggest change in there is the movement of the basic allotment from the 5140 to 6160. Now, that's an important thing there, and Marty referenced it. It's important to take that with a grain of salt, because initially you'd think, man, $1,000 more a WADA, and I've got 60,000 WADA. That's $60 million more to us, and now we don't have to pay $50 million of recapture. I mean, it's just raining money if you travel down that path. But then the devil in the details piece is that, okay, when we were getting the basic allotment of 5140, we also got the cost of education index. That's rolled into the basic allotment. The high school allotment, the gifted and talented allotment, the staff allotment, we're no longer getting those with House Bill 3. And so it's not a gap of going up $1,000. It's the incremental step is less than that. And then another major piece is that where before the amount that you had to raise locally was based on prior year value, now it's based on current year value, which is a higher number. So all of that factored in, to the math. The other major component on the state revenue piece was that the demographer is projecting us to grow by 827 students next year. So with all of that math, you see the state revenue goes to $36.2 million in next year's budget estimate. I will tell you that number is far from be the first to say that number's not set in stone. There's literally, we got a update on Omar's model yesterday. It's literally trying to take all of that information that Marty talked about and saying, okay, line by line, okay, for CTE program, they're adding 7th and 8th grade students. Well, how many of those? And it's a blow by blow. There's a lot of boxes, but you've got to understand the logic that's in the box and then get an estimate of that number and plug it in there. But looked at this number kind of through multiple lenses and kind of give you some perspective on that. Our number, when you take what we're getting between our current tax collection, like property tax collection and state revenue, we're at roughly $401 million. Right after they kind of tapped the gavel, TSA did a model run. They had us at $396 million. TASBO did a run either early this week or late last week. They were at $398 million. So both of those runs are within $3 to $5 million of our current number. We're actually, and Wayne is the one doing the work of taking Omar's model, dropping our estimated numbers in, and so with that math, that's where we're getting our number of actual numbers that we know. But in the kind of does it pass the smell test, the numbers that our model is kicking out is within reason of TASA and TASBO's number. So feel good that even though between now and 2 weeks from now when we ask for board adoption, you might see me coming back with a different number. It's just going to be at that point in time, based on our best estimate, given everything, what that number is. But for tonight, this is our best state number. Then on line item 8, the community school and employee revenue program, the $2 million, that's our current run rate for that line item. So we've got that in next year's budget. Teacher retirement on behalf goes up because of the pay raise and additional staff. What we get on the revenue side, you'll see that exact same number is shown on the expense as an expense. It's just a pass through from the state. So our total revenue is at $438 million. And just an obvious logic thing is, well, hey, if Marty said it was all so good, then why is our revenue year over year down? Okay, but the piece there, and we talked about this at the last workshop, is that if you looked at line 32 on the expenses, in our current year, we paid $32 million of recapture. Next year, since they raised the basic allotment and compressed the tax rate, we have no recapture next year. Had current law just stayed in place, that recapture number would have been $51 million. So that was, that's a reason that even though we're not seeing an increase on the revenue side, we don't have what would have been $50 million of expense had the current law, had there been no changes to the current law. So just wanted to make you aware of that. So to flip then to the next page on the expense side, the first line of the salary and benefits, that's based on last year's budget. So sort of as a starting point, if we just mimicked last year, that would be our number. The things that we've done over and above that in our budget is on line 16 for additional and staff based on growth in pre-K. House Bill 3 added full-day pre-K, so we're planning to add staff for that. Plus the growth of over 800 students takes additional staff in order to do that. So we've got $7 million in the budget for additional teachers and staff to handle that growth. Then on line 17 with the salary increases, at the last board meeting in May, board approved a 3.5% pay raise. That $14.8 million is the burdened cost of that raise. And then on 18, as the board knows, we did a $2 million district contribution toward medical so that the employees' contribution toward medical wouldn't have to be increased, and also that we wanted the self-insured fund to be balanced, that our expected expenses would be offset by the expected premiums that the employees pay plus the district's contribution, which we're going to be raising in January from $370 to $400 a month. So that's that component. On the campuses, that increase is simply based on an allotment per child. We have more students, so the campus allotment went up. On the department piece, as we previously told the board, we sent out and asked each department manager, got 75 of them, asked them to reduce their department budgets by 5%. Because that would generate a $2 million savings that we could use to offset the contribution that we just talked about toward employee medical insurance. If they said they needed additional funds, we gave them additional funds. For example, SPED, CTE, pre-K, we increased their budgets based on a stated need for that. So that's in there. One thing on the department piece, just to make the board aware, it made reference before in terms of transportation. One of the big things that the board approved back in May was a $3 an hour increase for drivers. We've chronically been short drivers. Our pay was at a little over $16 an hour to start. We raised that to $19 an hour. Pflugerville raised theirs to $20 an hour. And so what we've done to try to address, hey, not only given the $3 an hour raise, but we also put out an RFP on the street, basically looking to contract with a firm. We'll evaluate it, all that sort of thing, but we're looking for a firm that can basically cover what we can't cover ourselves. So we said, hey, we're ballparking it. We'll see how we actually do when we start the school, but from a ballpark, we'd be looking to contract for around 30 routes and 30 monitors. We'll see what we actually need when school starts, but that bid is out on the street. And so if we get a good vendor and with a good track record and a good price tag, we'll be looking to do contract with them to help us cover all the routes and service that we need starting in the fall. On line 25 with food service, that's the allocation we've previously talked about in terms of the shared operating cost, that the light bill for SRO coverage in the cafeteria is doing that allotment, and that allows us to move $1.6 million from the general fund and have the food service budget pay for that cost. Then the strategic plan and innovation initiatives, 800 of that is for strategic initiatives, 400,000 of that is for innovation initiative grants. Safety and security cost, we've broken that out. The budgeted cost for next year is $2.6 million based on our expected cost with Williamson, Travis County, and then also ACC. And then on line 28 with the mental health initiatives, we have an RFP out on the street for that, with the intent of looking to contract with a mental health firm that provides mental health counselors. We've done an initial estimate of $250,000 with sort of the logic of that would fund for the equivalent of 2 FTEs, even though they won't be on our payroll. It would be the equivalent of the cost of 2 people to service the district, sort of like one on the east side, one on the west side, but they're a firm. If we needed 3 or 4 counselors on a given day, we'd pay for what we need. And that's a number that simply will live the experience. If we need to spend more than that, we'll spend more than that, but you've got to put some number down. We don't even have the bids in yet, but we've put $250,000 in there for that, but with just sort of the intent of a hand on the dial. If we need more, we'll spend what we need to cover the mental health needs of our student body. So that's that number. Then on line 32, as I said, there's 0 on the recapture due to the increase in the basic allotment. So when you get to the bottom line, all that to say, the good news on this is we've got a balanced budget for next year with these assumptions, and that's also, and we'll talk about this in a future slide. One of the things that's really important about this, and that I'm really happy for us as a district, is not only is this budget balanced, but it is truly a budget that's based on what we collectively think are our annual operating costs for next year. Everything of that is on this proverbial 1 sheet of paper, 2 sheets of paper type of thing. We don't have a situation where we've told other people, hey, you're allowed to spend money that will ultimately fund, that will flow through this account, but it's not included in this initial budget. Everything that we're expecting to spend from an operating basis is in this budget and has a balanced budget as part of it. So that's the general fund. I'm going to step you through some of the other ones as well, and then at the end we can open it up for questions. But in terms of the debt service, so when we come back in 2 weeks, we'll be asking the board to approve 2 budgets: the general fund that we just talked about, also the debt service budget. The things to sort of cover there is the fact that we're not planning to change the tax rate. That would remain at the current rate of 26.48 cents. The property tax revenue is based on that tax rate and our current property value, which is estimated at $38.7 million. On other local revenue of the $2.1 million, that's based on interest earnings on our fund balance in the debt service fund. And then the federal program revenue of $2.5 million. Some of our bonds are called BABs. They're Build America bonds that we get a subsidy through the federal government on those bonds, and that's budgeted at $2.5 million. So we expect to take in $104.4 million of revenue on the debt service fund. We make semi-annual principal and interest payments on February 1st and August 1st each year. So those payments will be a combined $69 million of principal, $33.8 million worth of interest. So we've got $102.8 million of expenses, and with the expectation that we'd have a bottom line there of $1.6 million. Next, on the food service budget, and this is a budget that the board doesn't approve, but just to sort of provide you information there, we're not planning to change the meal prices that are charged. The reason for the increase in the paid lunches, which is the other main portion of the other revenues, is we've got additional students. So Aramark's estimate is additional students leads to additional meals. So that number is is going up. Also, the free and reduced, we get federal subsidy on children that are on the free and reduced program. So that's going up based on additional head count. So the budgeted revenue there is $20.9 million. Payroll cost increase, we've given pay raises on for the food service side, and you have some other expenses there. One thing to note on the food service side, currently we contract with Aramark to provide management. One of the things that we looked at when I met with Aramark 2 weeks ago, we talked with them about the contract. The contract actually allows the employees to either be our employees or the contractor's employees. And one of the things that we're looking to do as a district, and unless the board has any concern about doing it, would be to, as existing employees attrit, to allow the new employee to come over to let Aramark hire them, train them, keep them on their payroll, so it bleeds pressure off of our staff. HR doesn't have to hire the person, don't have to do the payroll, the benefits, all that sort of thing. They would get paid just like they currently do. An option that it allows, if I'm the employee, I can stay with the district on the district payroll as long as I want to. An upside as an employee would be, if I'm close to retirement or at retirement age, I could retire, start drawing TRS, and then go to work for Aramark and get a paycheck through Aramark. Also through Aramark, like through the district, I wouldn't be eligible for unemployment benefits during the summer. But with Aramark, I would be eligible for unemployment. So there'd be a win there, but that would be to the employee, which way they'd would want to do.
A question, if that's right, Mr. Matthew. Well,
I'll wait until the end of his presentation.
Okay. So with that, and then that's, I guess, all there is on that. Have a balanced budget for next year there. And then the next piece is just to let you know, and we'll also talk about this with the PIB and also with the facility boards committee as well. But we've talked about setting up a capital projects fund for next year with the intent of wanting to start with $10 million next year that we could use for capital projects that we don't have. Like if there's not money for a bond, we need to buy portables, we need to buy something unexpected or even planned, we'd have that money set aside in order to do that. So those individual categories, those have been sent out to the managers that would be responsible for those individual line items. I've simply asked them to, hey, give me your estimated number over the next 5 years. How much do you think it needs for whatever standard you're setting and advocating for? What is the price tag of that standard? So these funds, like it says in the footnote, wouldn't be part of an operating budget. It wouldn't be part of the current bond. Or if you were just already planning to put it in a future bond, that's not on this sheet. This would just be, if it's not in their operating budget or in a current bond, what say you in terms of a need? What that will allow the board to do, administration to do, the community to do, is on one sheet of paper, see if we wanted whatever standard we want to set for ourselves, what does that cost? And take as an example with the general fund that we're talking about, if the board ultimately in 2 weeks taps the gavel and we have a balanced budget, okay, my absolute expectation is that when we're sitting here next year at this time and basically saying, okay, how do we do for the year, I would absolutely expect us to have a positive bottom line because 90% of our cost is payroll. There's going to be vacant positions, all that sort of thing. So we would have a way to use our income statement to funnel up to a given point of need over the course of time, just as an ongoing basis. We're going to set aside, if the board agrees to it, $10 million. But, okay, what happens when that's spent? Well, we could funnel money from the general fund each year to be a source of funds. But the other piece then is, so if it's a millions of dollar number, we could get that off of the income statement. If that comes back, and I haven't got the numbers back, but if that was tens of millions of dollars, then it really becomes a situation of, okay, if we want it, then, and we can't fund it out of the operating statement funds year over year, that would say that's something that's going to have to go in the next bond. But then the board would be able to say, hey, I really think ultimately we're going to get agreement on whatever that sheet of paper has on it, but then we can advocate. The board can advocate, the community can advocate for, yeah, I really agree with it, put it in the next bond, I support it. Well, now you've got something to look at on one sheet that tells you that story. So that's what this is about. As we get that information, we'll talk with the board about that at future PIB meetings and facility committee meetings. The next slide gives you the actual numbers of a conversation we've also previously had about wanting to significantly reduce the number of different categories we have of our general fund balance. That there's currently 23 different categorizations of our general fund balance. This reduces that down to 6 and has a capital projects number at the bottom, the second to the last number of $10 million. So short and sweet, it's like instead of looking at the first column of numbers and having that be what you see when the CAFR comes before you for approval and all of that categorization, the proposed one would look like this. It would simply be these categories. You'd have six categories of fund balance and a capital projects fund. So it's much cleaner, much more straightforward, and so that's that piece, and that's that logic. So with that, I know a whole lot of numbers, all that sort of thing, but are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you for the excellent presentation. A lot of numbers. I looked back a year ago and I looked at the numbers and I said, Chapter 41, $32 million, and it's going to grow to, what's the number? 50. And I just saw that as a huge tidal wave coming at us. And thank goodness, I mean, if I were a news reporter, I would say, RRISD avoids $50 million, Chapter 41, and that's great. And I think with that $50 million that we don't have to pay, roughly half of that is going to salaries and benefits, which is a great place to have it go, and half of it is going to allowing us to have a balanced budget. So it ended up being a real happy ending from what I'm seeing here. So I'm going to ask the same question that I asked the last time we met, which is this temporary relief, or are we going to have Chapter 41 sneak up on us in 2 or 3 or 4 years?
Right. So I ran the projections and it's kind of like, hey, all we know right now is the next 2 years, because then it'll be what does the legislation do in terms of the basic allotment. But to me, we're safe for this year and for next year in terms of recapture. I'm not expecting us to have any recapture this year or next year if our property values grow at 5%. It's really, as a side note, what's going to happen to us when we're sitting here next year at this time is that this year they compress the tax rate by 7 cents. The next year's rule book is to say for the first 2.5% that your property value grows, the tax rate won't get compressed, but beyond that, then it starts getting compressed again. Okay, and so just FYI on that. But in short answer, these next 2 years, no recapture. Then it becomes simply what does the legislature do with the basic allotment after that?
Okay. Well, that's great. And I think Dr. Flores made the point at the last meeting. That kind of gives us a 2-year window to really look at how we're spending our money and get down to our fighting weight. So, it's relief, but we've got to look at it as if it's not always going to be there, and just be prudent.
And to that point, we've already started meeting. We formed an efficiency team, like staffing efficiency team. Had our first meeting probably a month ago, and that committee will continue to meet with that literal intent of, hey, how do we do it? How do we do it better? And everything. My kind of mantra is literally, there's the pin. What do you want your pay raise to be next year? If you can come up with, every $4 million we save, that's $4 million that we can put into a 1% pay raise for people. So the work's before us. They're not going to be moving the basic allotment next year or the value of the golden pennies. So my expectation right now is that if we grow by 1,000 kids and we get all in like $8,000 a kid, we'll probably get $8 million of incremental funding next year. So it's not going to be a $24 million increase like it was this year. It's going to be $8 million-ish. So, with 1,000, you got to grow by 1,000 kids. So, you're going to need staff, all that kind of thing. So that's the deal of we're going to have to, do the work to, as you said, be as efficient as we can be.
Thank you.
Ms. Bessa.
I really like what you just said there, that right now we're seeing, $24 million of additional revenue, but next year we're not going to get $24 million of additional revenue. And so in order for us to give pay raises and continue to do the priorities that we want to do, we have to find revenue for that.
All right.
But I have a couple other questions too. So back to the contracting with bus drivers. So it's 30 routes. Are we contracting with this company to provide the buses and the drivers, or is it just the drivers?
Right. It would just be the drivers and the monitors. We would provide we have the buses, so we would be providing those.
Okay. On regards to the 2.5% tax cap, that's just the M&O tax rate. That doesn't affect our INS tax rate.
Right.
Okay. And then lastly, back to the line item for mental health. Are we going to get some more information about that? Like, I'm not exactly, we've talked a lot about adding crisis counselors on school campuses. That's been one of the task force recommendations. Also, SHAC. And is that what these are?
So that is in line with the SHAC recommendation. The idea behind this is to contract with a local agency to bring in that support. And as Dr. Audix described, it could be perhaps one day only one person, but maybe another day there's a lot of kids in need and we're able to pull in more. We are going into the RFP, as he said, and hope to finish it in July. And so we'll have more pricing details about that. We did some preliminary work with a couple of agencies and looked at some models. So the 250 that you see on the budget sheet should allow us to have an east and a west side. Now that'll get us going. Should we see that there's more need than that, then certainly we'd want to increase that. The counterpart to that, though, is that right now, the people providing those types of services or coordinating with agencies are our counselors. And so our counselors would have a conduit to quickly get support for kids who were perhaps suicidal or in need of some drug counseling and so forth. And so it will, we anticipate, serve to lessen somewhat the duties on our counselors as well, because it's all going to be working in tandem. So a lot to explore, and we may as we go into this, come back to the board and request some additional. But we feel like for right now that's a good placeholder to get us through the RFP and get the model contracted with an agency and get started.
So these are just this is not necessarily, these are kids that are really in crisis.
Outliers. Yeah, we have referred to these as outlier situations. But when you're in a school and you have a kid in crisis, it could take a counselor away from their anticipated duties for an entire day, depending on the situation that arises. And so this, I think, would allow us to move very quickly into those situations while still maintaining the core work of the counselors. We're not talking about serving our kids who are dealing with a temporary situation of a situation with a friend, or because our counselors are certainly trained in that. We're talking more our cases where we really need some mental health support for our kiddos.
So you're anticipating, though, that this is just the 250, because, I know that we have a budget for counselors, but I think we all agree that right now though they do have some mental health components, their primary role, especially in high school, is to handle schedules and college preparation.
I'd say that they do a mix. They really do a mix. Now, yes, they do a lot of scheduling and college preparation, but our counselors go, they are trained primarily in supporting students. They don't go to college to do schedules per se, but by default they do a lot of that college and career planning too.
Well, how much other money are we spending on purely mental health? Are we really, because I just think about the legislation, like Representative Tallarico's legislation about having, higher ratios of counselors than you have to law enforcement or security personnel. And right now, this budget looks like we're spending like a tenth of what we spend on safety and security personnel, on mental health personnel.
Well, and you have to keep in mind that would not include our counseling staff that's currently
So how
in
much?
place.
What budget is that for counselors?
I don't have that information. I'd have to get Annette or Dr. Audix to provide you with that number. We staff within staffing guidelines that were developed for counselors. I do know that we added counselors a few years back to each of our high schools, and so I think the district has tried to stay at the forefront of making sure that we have an adequate number of counselors. But that's certainly something that we'll be looking at in this efficiency study too. Do we need to add counselors in lieu of something else? Could be something that teams talk about.
I just want to make sure that we have budgeted. This is something I've talked about for several months, about making sure that we reflect that the Safety and Security Task Force's recommendations to add more mental health support, the SHAC's recommendations to add more mental health support. It just seems like $250,000 is just such. It doesn't seem like it's enough to address their recommendations.
Those are dedicated. That's on top of the other counselors that we
I
have.
think we consider it to be a starting point. And one other piece that the SHAC recommended a year ago that we implemented was we increased our behavior coaches. And so we have 5 behavior coaches who go out and work with the campuses. They're under Barry Ryan at the district, the DAEP. They serve kids who are starting to show some signs of misbehavior elementary and middle school. Often that's going to be triggered or tied in with some mental health type of concerns. And so we added that layer. We've also added an SEL coordinator in recent years as well. So I see this as the next leg of that comprehensive system, working in conjunction with our counseling staff.
Go ahead, Dr.
No, I was just going to say, Dr. Presser, you might comment. One of the things that our counselor-to-student ratio at our high schools in Round Rock ISD, I've been in, I think, 5 districts, and it by far surpasses. In fact, previous boards 2 years ago also added an additional counselor. So again, this $250,000 may seem like not enough, but with what we do right now, and then what we may be doing to come back later to say is, wait, that may not be enough. We'll continue to monitor that. But I do want to talk about the counselor-student ratio, and also we do have school service or school social workers as well. I think that we have 3 in the district, and pregnancy-related services, and the expansion possibly can be to campuses with regards to that as well. So can you speak to those?
I can make a couple comments. Past boards have been very in tune to the social emotional needs of our kids. And someone referenced in a recent board meeting, that the national standard should be 250, one counselor for every 250 students. I don't know of a district that meets that, but you can look at similar ratios, like the National Library Association will say you need this many square foot of library for every kid. And so I'm not saying that's not doable or it's not ideal, but I can tell you in Round Rock, compared to surrounding districts that I'm aware of, we have many counselors compared to other districts. Counselors only come to Round Rock because of the ratios that they have. So I'm not saying we're there yet. But as Mandy has mentioned, we've made incremental steps over the years with the social emotional learning coordinator and some other positions. We have the expansion of behavioral specialists from kindergarten through 8th grade. I think we had 2, and we went to 5, working with the kids at the earliest ages so that they get better at what they do. The $250,000 is I don't want to call it a placeholder, but that's a starting point with the RFP out to see what the needs will be, what we will charge. And I also want to mention that what Mandy talked about, all of our counselors in their professional development and their training to become a counselor are trained in crisis intervention and working with kids with extreme needs. But they are, they do have tasks other than that, as you mentioned in high school, with, making sure kids get across the stage and their credits are there. And not all kids need those extreme counseling episodes, those extreme counseling services. But it does take some time if a counselor is dealing with the situation of a particular kid. It may take a day or two working with that kid and family where they're pulled away. Different campuses have different ways of going about that. Some of our campuses, for example, they do a rotation where a counselor I'll take a high school, for example, among the counseling staff is dedicated on certain days to be the crisis counselor for that point in time. And so they know that they're on call and they have coverage from other counselors with their general academic counseling if they're pulled away for a crisis situation. But I could tell you hundreds of episodes throughout the district where counselors are dealing with those heavy issues all the time. And they do pass the baton to local services when there is they'll call a mental health unit to come out. If there's any kind of abuse situations, they quickly turn that over to other authorities in the district, in the county, to deal with that. So there are agencies and opportunities out there to help serve our students. But I think this is a good step in the direction. Is $250,000 enough? I don't know at this point. But with the recommendations of the SHAC and what we're hearing from the task force, who haven't brought forth their options yet, but they will, it seems like that's going to be a pretty high priority for the task force that's working to see what we need to do to serve our kids. So I think the $250,000 is a good starting point, but we may be coming back later to say, look, we got way more needs, that we're having to contract with more folks. And when Dr. Oddix mentioned the east and west side, that's the way it'll be structured initially, but there could be situations on anywhere in the district where it may require more support at certain times than others, and then there may be times where we don't need much support at all beyond our normal counseling services.
Okay, let me get to Ms. Weir here a little bit.
Well, because I just kind of wanted to follow up. So I'm just sort of trying to process all of it. But, I really agree with Corey, and I get that 250 is just a holding place, but we're really close to a balanced budget, and, you're saying that we may have some extra money, but, is it something that we need to prioritize a little bit more? And I don't really know how McNeil does it, but I know that, you go and you sign up and you say why you've got to go, and then you got to go back to class, and then your counselor calls you. And I know that my kids have had, friends that really needed to talk to somebody right then. And, we used to have, when we had Jinx Lacey, we used to have one person that you would be kind of that person you went to if you were in that situation and not your regular counselor. And I guess I don't see the problem with going ahead and maybe budgeting a little bit more if that's kind of where we think other people are, going.
I think here's literally my view on it. Is literally, I would say from my straight up, we're going to spend whatever it takes. Okay, it's an unknown number. Okay, we're putting $250,000 in there. We know that with vacancies, all that sort of thing, we're going to have payroll costs less than the budget amount. That's the absolute expectation. So if that number came in and it was $1 million, and we started having to pay the counselors and it was $1 million, I'd say, okay, we're going to take that $250, do a budget amendment to make it $1 million because that's our run rate. But it's like we're dealing with an unknown. So it's like we can guess all day. But the thing is, in living the experience, whatever that experience cost us, I'm committing that we'll put the resources to meet that need. It's simply, from a budget perspective, we're dealing with an unknown. If the unknown cost us more than the budget, we've got a funding source of just vacant positions that could offset that cost.
I think I would rather put $1 million there and not need all the resources than put $250,000 and signal to our community that that's how much. Because they're not going to know this conversation. They're going to see a budget that says $250,000, 10% of what we spend on our safety and security initiatives went to mental health. They're not going to understand this whole dynamic that, we'll have a budget amendment later. They're not going to get that.
So I think
it's a message.
It might be helpful how you pulled out the safety and security from the department line item and created a new line item of its own to really put in the budget what we spent this year on mental health initiatives in the district. And whatever those figures are of our current counselors or things like that, and then what this increases, because the way it's presented, it looks like we currently spend nothing on mental health, and then we're increasing it to $250,000. Just like the last budget looked like we spent nothing on safety and security, and now we're asking for $2.6 million. So it's the way it's presented, because we are spending a lot of money on mental, and I'm the first one to say I think mental health initiatives are great, but it appears that we're currently spending nothing, and then we're increasing it only by $250,000. And I love the idea of contracting, because mental health changes from day to day. And if you say I'm just going to hire somebody to be at every school, then there's a chance that they could be underutilized. You might need more at one school one day. So I like the idea of having this contracting options, but maybe delineating it a little bit clearer of how much we're spending currently and what we're increasing that to. Just an idea.
If the board wants to do that, I can bring that forward at the board meeting.
Yeah, I think it makes it clear that what we're actually spending and what the increase reflects, because it's not clear when you look at it. It looks like we're only spending a certain amount when the true optics is it's a lot greater than that.
So that would include the 5 behavioral specialists we added last year, or 3 we added last year to expand from 2 to 5, the social emotional coordinator, and the steps we've taken, because it is embedded in just the general staffing, right? And people can't see that.
Well, and you're right. Over the years that I've been on the board, we have addressed this, and it's been a greater amount for everything that's practically been asked for by the SHAC as well. And it's just not reflected here.
And I like that we still leave the option to add more to it, because it is an unknown target right now. And I think this board really supports any mental health initiatives, in providing more securities for our students. So I like that we are all on the same page of, if we need more, we'll give more.
And I think it's important to note, too, it's different for every campus from year to year. Like, in a given year, one campus may have a lot more situations than they did the year prior or the year after that. And so it is a moving need, right? You can't. So to hire people and say you're going to be assigned to this campus for this purpose, and then they kind of go unneeded a lot, not unneeded, but not as active. It makes more sense to me stepping into this dimension further than we've already stepped to have a contracted ability to bring in more resources, or if you don't need them, you don't pay for them.
Well, I'll just tell you, in my own personal world, because of that, if you don't use them, you're still paying for them. We do a lot of televideo in my business, because we can't afford to put a psychiatrist out in Giddings, because it's a lot of money and there may not be a lot of people. But when you need them, you can access them. So same kind of model that we're looking at going with the school district is, these are highly skilled and trained, licensed professionals that you want to utilize them if we're going to use them, and we don't want to pay for them to just sit around.
Mr. Moses, did you have your light on?
Yeah, I've been pressing it.
Sorry, it's been turning on and off, so it's off now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I agree. I really while I was waiting to talk, everything kind of got talked over what I was going to say, but it's fine. But yeah, I think while we would love to sit here and throw in a number for it, I think it's better to actually wait and see what the actual costs are going to be, and then bring that number back. I think that's just more prudent and a little bit wiser. I think hearing that conversation tonight, I think every single one of us, including staff, is committed to mental health and doing what we need to do to assist our students and assist our staff. But we need to hear what that actually is before we start just putting money at it. We want to make sure we're actually targeting those dollars effectively. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Ms. Bessa and then Ms. Feller.
So at elementary schools, we have counselors, correct? And based on certain ratio of students, what's their role?
They do a variety of things similar to the high school. Now they will go into classrooms and do some lessons with the kids, social emotional type of lessons. They'll do group counseling. Sometimes they'll do one-on-one. So it just they will also help with scheduling of students in classes. That's a lesser job on an elementary campus, obviously, than what it is at the high school level.
So we have a counselor at high school that or counselors that go and do similar work. They have groups, sessions. We have counselors that are talking about dealing with like stress in classrooms. We have counselors that are like available. I mean, for
yeah, you're going to see less going into classrooms and doing group lessons within a class, but you have, keep in mind elementary is self-contained too, so the whole master schedule, of course, is a little bit different. So you're going to see those groups more pulled into a room, or students coming down to work one-on-one with a counselor, maybe to students who are having trouble getting along might come down to work with a counselor. And Dr. Presley, you
I think at a lot of our schools, especially middle schools and high schools, the counselors work in tandem with the assistant principals when there are discipline issues or other behavioral issues to try to work that out. And I believe they do a really good job with that. But they'll counsel with kids, peer mediation, things like that, to try to work through issues that kids are having with each other, bullying issues, things like that, and try to intervene before discipline consequences until it gets further along the spectrum where some type of consequence is given.
Ms. Feller?
So I do have I have several questions, but the first one's on this the mental health initiative. Is the $250,000 in the RFP more of a crisis-based initiative? Do we have any metrics planned on how, if we can measure any changes or improvements in the mental health of our students? And I guess being in this field, I know that there aren't a whole lot of things like that, but how are we going to be able to tell, rather than putting out fires with crisis work, how are we going to have ongoing work with our mental health and I would say it would probably more be focused in even the middle school more than high school, but middle school and high school levels of initiatives or programs aimed at increasing their mental health awareness and their comfortability. And do you understand what I'm trying to say? Rather than just a crisis-focused budget line item, how will we know if we're being successful with this?
Yeah, I think those are details still to be worked out in this. There's going to be a close coordination with the counselors, and in this arrangement, what we're hoping to do is be able to access increasing levels of support as needed for whatever the student is going through, up to and including a psychiatrist. Of course, parents would be very involved in that part as well. But I think you make a great point. We will need a metric to measure the effectiveness of this. And as you know, some of those situations are fairly long-term situations with kids as well. But we do have a committee that's working on this, and I'll be happy to bring back details when we get to that point. I think what they focused on right now is the needs, what would we be looking for in a contract with an agency, what types of situations would we want that agency to be able to help us with.
Great, thank you. So my next question is, you mentioned behavioral coaches. How are they different behavior interventionists that write up behavior improvement plans and things like that? How is this different?
Well, you have them in both general ed world and in special ed world. And so when you talk about a behavior improvement plan, that's most likely attached to a student's ARD paperwork. And so those are going to be primarily versed in working with students with special needs. The behavior specialists that I was speaking of, and you'll hear behavior interventionists as well, are centrally deployed. They began a few years ago as an attempt on our part to be proactive on disciplinary referrals. So when a student was starting to act up at the campus level, if we could send a coach out to observe the student, work with a teacher on some strategies, then we might prevent that student from ever getting a referral to the DAP, and we did have great success with that model. Some of our campuses, or many of our campuses, also have a staff member that they designate as a behavior interventionist, which means that they're housed on the staff on the campus. They work with kids on a daily basis. They probably have a caseload of students maybe that they check in with each morning. They check out with them at the end of the day to review how their day went, and they're available to go and support that child at a moment's notice.
I think as many resources as we can provide in that level is going to help across the board, not only in our disciplinary referrals for our special education students. currently I think we have 2 in the special education world, one that works with most of the SPED kids and one that works with low incidence disabilities. And I
believe we have 3.
We have 3 now?
I think we went to 3, but
Okay,
I can
good.
double check that for you.
Good, because I know that we were taxed with 2. So I think the more support that we can provide, because those behavior problems lead to disciplinary referrals, which is what we're looking to get rid of.
Okay, Ms. Weir.
Well, I just want to make sure he's done with that because I'm going to totally change the topic.
I have one more question, but I'll come back.
Is it on that? Because if it is, please. Okay. So I just had a couple questions. One kind of had to do with Marty's presentation in Senate Bill 11 and kind of the emergency procedures and safety, and it's also mental health in that. So I'm assuming we're going to have to start looking at that. But I know that right now, like McNeil and Westwood's PTAs are trying to do trauma kits and trying to work with getting like repeaters and other things because with all of our cinder block, some of the classrooms you can't make a cell phone call out of them. And I guess I'm just wondering, are we, I don't even remember, Marty, if Senate Bill 11 had extra money, but are we going to be looking at those types of things as we come up with these plans? Is that part of our safety and security budget already, that these things are coming?
I think Mr. Yarborough is analyzing, he hasn't been here long, but he's analyzing our safety plan, our safety program in the district as a whole. He's almost to the completion, but he hasn't completed that yet, so I think he'll be making recommendations to the administration of improvements we need to make along that entire spectrum of where we have voids. We had I guess it's been it'll be 3 years, I think, in December, or November, we had a safety audit for the district. And so we'll probably do another safety audit soon, if not this fall, the following fall. And that's where they come in and analyze all of our facilities, all of our buildings, and every measure of safety and security district-wide. And our procedures as well, everything from how chemicals are stored in a science area to, doors that need replacement locks and things like that. So I think I don't want to misspeak, but I think we're due for another audit soon because we haven't had one. You guys remember the board approved an audit a few years ago, and we had the findings given to the board, and we met all those standards, everything from signage to, as I said, how chemicals are stored and which procedures we need to put in place that we don't have in the district. So I think you'll be seeing a recommendation probably soon for another safety audit, and I think Mr. Yarborough, with his experience in school safety and security, will be coming forth with recommendations that we need to implement, ASAP.
And I guess my question is the safety and security section of the budget, does it have any room for that, or is it just our contracts with our providers?
It's more than just the contracts. It's what we spend on safety and security across the board in the district. So, and we could be asking for an increase in that. I don't anticipate that, but it depends on what we're seeing from our new safety and security director.
Okay. So just a couple, since I know 2 of the PTAs are working on it, and I would hate for it not to be district-wide, if they were to get the funds. So I guess maybe they need to talk to him about.
Yeah, I know Ms. Donald's working on the Stop the Bleed kits to distribute throughout the district, and that initiative was started with Westwood and McNeil. So we're still looking at trying to get those in every classroom across the district.
The reason why it started with Westwood and McNeil is because the city of Austin approved money to get Stop the Bleed kits in every high school classroom within the city of Austin, and McNeil and Westwood fall within the city of Austin, but our other campuses do not. That's why those particular campuses have more traction on that issue, because they actually have funding from the city of Austin for those kits.
And the parents that are working on that are amazing parents, and they're wanting to scale that district-wide, and that's been since the beginning. It's not just about Westwood and McNeil, but about the entire district. So.
Yeah, and that's actually why I brought it up, because I know they really want it not to just be our 2 campuses with the city of Austin. So I think anything we can do as the district to help them get it to the other campuses would be great. And I did have just one other question, and it actually had to do with the debt services budget that you presented. So we have excess of $1.6 million on our INS tax rate. Does that just sit there? I mean, what happens with that money?
So what we do, there's a fund balance in debt service, and every month, like when when you see the monthly financials, you'll see a fund balance not only for general fund but debt service, all that sort of thing. Our reality is just like we did a bond sale this year. The start of next year, we're going to do another bond sale, and when that sale is done, what we'll be doing at that time is basically, like there's board policy that says we've got to keep a certain amount in fund balance of the debt service. We couldn't take that down to zero or $1 million and be within board policy. So there's a given cushion that by board policy we have to keep there. But then the plan is when we do our next bond sale, that's a time where, say that we had extra money, we could literally pay down debt and not have to borrow as much, at that time. So, and we're doing the plan is we're also going to plan to do embed a bond refunding when we do the next sale. So that's a point in time where we can take whatever extra funds are and use it to pay down our debt at that time.
I guess as a philosophical question, have we ever thought of, property tax, because it was such a big topic. Have we ever thought of giving our community a little bit of a tax break when we get to that point?
At which point?
Well, when we have that extra money, instead of, I guess we've already collected it, so we would pay down the debt, but would we then look forward and say, we don't want to do that again? Maybe we'll take a cent off or 2 cents off. And
the hard part with this is that, like, next year, we're going to be doing another bond sale, and then the year after that, we're going to, be doing another one. And so we collectively, between our principal and interest debt, we owe, like right now, like a little over $1.1 billion. And then next year when we borrow, say, another $200 million, it goes up. So what I don't want to do for the taxpayer is, like, hey, this year I'm going to lower you a half a cent, and then, next year I had to issue $200 million of debt, and so now I want to try to raise your tax rate. I'd rather just, to the extent possible, keep a tax rate that's as consistent as, just keep it consistent. Structure our debt to where, because we've not only got to deal with repaying, this $500 million that we are in the process of borrowing, but hey, we're growing 1,000 students a year. We're going to have another bond election that's going to have to be paid for as well. So all of that to say, I absolutely will do everything, and I'm sure the board will as well, to try to be as, as keep that tax rate as low as we can. But we've also got to, take into perspective that we've got to, be able to repay our debt and structure our debt.
And part of that, just the history of, as I've been on the board of this is, if you pay off the debt faster, so then you save interest on the back end. So yeah, you don't necessarily see that immediate hit, a reduction in tax rate now, but the goal is pay it off faster, so then when it's all paid off, potentially you'll lower.
But we never pay it off. We just go out for another.
My first year on the board, we lowered the tax rate. My second year on the board lowered the tax rate because we paid off debt. So it happens.
You pay it off as you get it.
Right.
I've got a couple questions. We've been going for 2.5 hours, or 2 hours a little bit. Can we take a quick break? We'll come back here and wrap this section up and ask questions. Is that all right? I can do that? Then I've got a couple otherwise. Okay. All right. It's 9:37. Let's take a quick break. All right. Ready to reconvene here? Let's go back in. It's 9:53. We have everybody back. So let's go ahead and continue our questions here. Mr. Math next, and then Ms. Vesidere. Okay.
Yeah, just reflecting back on conversation we had before the break. I think it would be advisable to put in, I like Ms. Vesta's number, $1 million for the mental health initiatives. It's just a different placeholder. It's not going to be 250. It's not going to be $1 million, but I just think $1 million is maybe more in the range of showing a commitment.
I'm sorry. Real quick, where's that money going to get pulled from? Or are you saying go ahead and just run the deficit? And then we've run deficit budget before. I'm just asking, where's?
I'd either run a deficit or I'd set up an accrual for expected salary non-expenditures, or whatever the correct term is. But even if we run a deficit, that wouldn't be unprecedented.
Yeah, no. I'm just trying to figure out where that's just going to come from. That's all I'm trying to figure out.
Maybe there's a happy medium, maybe not $1 million, but maybe double the 250.
I don't know. What are the other
I'd be more comfortable with that, because I would hate to put a number in there and then we rush to spend all the money and we're not using best practices and looking at what works and what doesn't.
I don't think, Mr. Oddick, I don't think you're a rush to spend kind of guy. I'm going to assume even if we put $1 million that you're not going to just rush to spend it all. But I do feel like, I mean, just having had kids go through high school, I mean, the idea that we would have a counselor or somebody that didn't have anything to do seems not realistic. There's a lot of kids that need help, and I guess and sort of looking at some of the different bills that are coming and some of the things that other districts have done with their, we're going to have these, I don't know, multi-hazard teams or whatever that's coming up from some of these bills. And I know a lot of the school districts use mental health. I know Fort Bend does in their student threat assessment teams. They have a lot of mental health component to that. I guess I would just feel more comfortable having a bigger number to start with. And if we want to do a balanced budget, I mean, if that had to come maybe from our, innovative grants, and just hold off on that for a little while till we know what it's going to be, and then we can change it. That's only if people felt like they needed to have it absolutely balanced right now. But I would rather have it there so that people know they can go there if we need to go there.
You've got several question lights here. So Ms. Vessa, then I think you have, and then Mr. Moses, Ms. Feller.
I think it's a statement of intent. I think it's a statement of priority. I think it's saying that we value this that much more. And that's why I was like, I agree, we need to coalesce, what we do currently spend so it doesn't look like we're just spending $250,000 more. But for me, that's why I think that, we may need it all. We've never done anything like this before. So in truth, we may need all of that money. And we may have been approving it in a budget amendment in October anyway. But I don't know. That's the way I look at it. It's a statement of intent. It's a statement of priority. It's a statement of value.
I think Mr. Moses and then Mrs. Feller.
I think we made that statement of intent and value multiple times, and whether it's in this conversation or about the PD task force or about the shack, I feel like that's been made clear. I also think that perhaps a solution could be, let's wait and see what that pulled out number looks like. Because that number gets pulled out and it looks like something that we don't know. Maybe it's like, okay, maybe 250 isn't enough. Maybe we do like 5 or something like that. But Mel's come back and say, okay, hang on, here, pulling $1 million into that where's that going to go? And I'm just not a big fan of allocating money to something without a real plan of what we're going to use it for. And so I'd just say I think they're hearing the conversation of what is desired, but I would say let's wait until we see all that pulled out before we say, yeah, let's put an additional $750,000 to that.
If I could suggest too, I think it might be interesting for the board to have an update on what we do have in place as well. We did one about a year and a half ago, but we have new trustees now, and we had Amy Grosso, Rochelle Fink, we had Christina Wiswell, all talk about the total package of programs that we have. So I'm certainly, that's a board decision on the number amount, and we'll support whatever goes in that placeholder. But I think the message we heard too was that an update on our programs might be in order.
I've said it many times. I 100% support mental health and its initiatives. What concerns me about just putting a random number in there is it's really the only line item that's not based on some kind of plan or some kind of we're going to hire this many people or we're going to do this program or we're going to bring in mental health first aid for all of our teachers and give them a stipend. There's no plan for the money right now. And so I would love to see how we could spend money on mental health and then say, okay, here are some initiatives, and if we give every teacher a $150 stipend for going through mental health first aid for youth, or something like that. But rather than just putting a line item that there's no plan for and how we're going to spend it outside of this crisis RFP, it just seems like, and I hate to take it from something that we've already planned and budgeted for, and that there's whatever, we would pull it from somewhere that money's already budgeted to be spent that way. So that's the only, I'm all for spending more money on mental health, but without a plan for it to know it's really just an arbitrary number that sounds good,
if we don't know what we're going to do with it.
I think Mandy just mentioned, I think it's important to note, because I think the optics of this is that we're doing very little with mental health right now, and we haven't been, and so let's just put $250,000 on it. And I think the presentation would be good for the board, because I can think of, just off the top of my head, 9 or 10 positions we have in the district, aside from special needs, aside from our regular counseling allotments, that work exclusively with mental health and social emotional health in the district. And that's, once again, from past boards who have granted new positions as we've added. So it's not like we're starting from zero. We can always do better. We can always do more, and I get that.
But we have to know what we have first
right.
before
and
we
I
can
think
do
I
better.
think it would be important for the board to hear which positions we have on a separate line item maybe, and we can work with Kenneth to pull that. Not pulling out counselors, because they do all sorts of things. That's part of the equation. But for someone just to look and go, mental health is a huge thing in 2019, and we're going to spend $250,000 on it, and that's all. Because I think it's important for the public to know all the different positions we have in the areas where we're working on that, and where we've added in the last few years as well.
So we're not voting on the budget tonight.
Right.
So if you can, before maybe the board update, the next board update, order an email next week. Doesn't have to be tomorrow, of course. Give us an update and say this is how many counselors, mental, whatever, and say so.
And this may get sticky, and other board members may not agree, but when you're providing that spreadsheet of where our counselors are and things like that, maybe even if you could estimate what portion of their day is spent on academic advising, and then what portion, if it's 60% academic advising or if it's 30%, like how much are they actually getting out and dealing with the mental health needs in our kiddos? And if we have, 45 counselors at X dollars amount, but only 60% of that is spent on mental health counseling and things like that. And it may not be that easy. Like I said, it may be kind of a sticky formula to do that, but I want to make sure that we're also looking at it really realistically of what the money.
So I think all great points. I'm glad to see that this board is enthusiastic about mental health, and kind of comparing it to the task force, which we'll talk about here briefly in a moment. But that safety and security is all related. Dr. Flores, if you can give us some information in an email, and in that way we can review it before we vote. And if we decide we want to bump it to 500, or just give us a justification, whatever you come up with. So
I can get that. I think in information, and I just look to staff by Thursday, next Thursday's update.
Okay.
Gives us a few days.
A lot of that will be HR data to compile, but I'll work with Annette to get that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the budget for right now? Yes. No. Okay. Ms. Bessa, go ahead.
This is a very exciting night for me, okay? We got $24 million more. We're not talking about how are we going to survive this next year. We're talking about a really substantial pay raise. We're talking about adding mental health. We're arguing over how we can spend the additional money we got. This is a celebratory moment. I want to take it. Yay! That's all I have to say.
Okay. I second that motion. All right. All right. Anything else on that for right now? Again, this is a discussion. You're available for phone calls if we need to. Thank you for reaching out this afternoon and available on that. So, all right. With that, let's go to agenda item E3, Safety and Security Task Force. We really don't have a presentation tonight. I'm going to summarize a letter that we got, an email from Ms. Moore, Lisa Moore, the co-chair, and other trustees, if you all want to jump in and make a comment on that. But she essentially said they met since I think they last presented in front of this board. They appointed and unanimously selected Judge Aurora as a co-chair. They met this past Monday evening. They're breaking out into subgroups, 4 subgroups, I think, with roughly 4 people each. They're going to come back to us next or 2 weeks from tonight and give us a timeline, a tentative timeline with feedback from the town hall meetings. They're still compiling their surveys, information from that. She don't have any details on that. Again, she said August they'll have a preliminary. Is this right? And then in September be a final one. So, and then we'll have some more information. Right now, we're set for next year. Is that right, Dr. Flores? Our contracts are still valid with those 2, 3?
Yeah, with Wilco, the Sheriff's Department has the interlocal agreement right now. We've made some slight adjustments to it, and we're waiting for the county attorney to send that back.
Just want to make sure that everybody knows that we will have coverage. Maybe not everything we want starting August. Is that right?
Right.
Well, the one change, though, will be Canyon Vista, who's had a ACC officer the last 2 years, because our agreement with ACC for the 2 officers from their police department has expired, and they can't give us an officer next year. So Canyon Vista, that's had an officer, will not have one. We don't have a plan right now for an officer there.
Okay. And then we have a meeting set up next Wednesday with 3 of us, and then Ms. Moore, and then did I understand that Dr. Presley wants to join us, and I think that'll be fine. So, Ms. Feller, with the sheriff is what I make sure. Okay, go ahead.
And I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I know we have 2 members of the task force in the audience tonight. Being a workshop, could we possibly open up the mic if they had any comments based on this timeline, if they thought that it was reasonable, or if they, their thoughts on input on how it was created? We've only heard from Ms. Moore, and being a workshop, we can be a little more flexible.
Legally, is that okay?
Anybody?
I'm fine. I see a couple of board. Is that okay? Just give us a quick, if you're open to it.
They have anything that they want to say? I mean, you may not even, but I'm like, there's 2 of them here. I thought. You have to contact them. And just for the record, Ms. Moore was not asked to be here, and she didn't show. I just want to make sure.
Sure, that's fine.
I didn't want the record to look like she didn't show up. So.
Have a seat and press the red button real quick and give us a quick overview of. Yeah. And go ahead and state your name, please.
Leah Nolan.
Speak close, speak in the mic so everybody can hear you.
Okay. Normally I do have a big mouth. No, I personally, I'm very pleased that we did sit down and we came up with, the preliminary draft of the timeline in terms of when we'd like to bring something to you guys. And so I'm just glad it feels like we're moving forward. We got into our breakout groups. That looks to be promising, so I'm excited about where we're going.
Okay, great. Mr. Hanna, anything other than that? Okay, thank you. So I'm optimistic too that I see I really like the idea of the breakout groups and appreciate their feedback on it. Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I hate the Lisa's not here, because my question would be, what safeguards are in place that they're actually going to meet this deadline? Because to be quite frank, they were supposed to bring us a timeline like this in April, or not get it until June. And so I just don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to meet that September deadline. And I think that means we're going into school year without a real plan and long-term plan in place for what we're going to do. And let's not kid ourselves. Now school's out, I feel like some of this can be a little bit more out there. We had a number of middle schools, East 35, without an SRO for most of the second half of the school year. And I know we're hoping that we can get that fixed before next school year, but there's no guarantee. And we're going to start school year and have to look parents in the eye and say, we don't have a plan. And that we're just waiting to hear from a task force. So I want to hear from the rest of the board and what their thoughts on this timeline. But, folks, at the end of the day, we're the board. I mean, I appreciate the task force has done great work, and I think they can still do great work. But we have to set expectations. Would we allow a student, would a teacher allow a student to turn in an assignment 5 months late? Would central office allow someone else in a district to turn in an assignment 5 months late? If we asked Dr. Flores' team to bring us something within a certain time frame, they brought to us 5 months late, how would you feel? How would we react?
Well, I will say,
and so we're allowing a group that, quite frankly, is unelected to drive this timeline and not ourselves. So I want to encourage us to have a real conversation tonight. to see if the majority of the board feels this, then I will stop beating the drum. But I think we got to decide if we're really okay to start next school year with no long-term plan, and if we need to start having conversations parallel to the task force, which I thought the consensus was after last meeting was to have Dr. Flores and the team update the cost estimates for our own PD. We had the meeting scheduled with Sheriff Chody fine, which is great. So I mean, we have to start having the conversations ourselves, and hopefully we'll meet at some point. But if we get to that point first, that just needs to be out there.
I would just like to say that, I mean, we did give them a date, and then they were verbally told that, I mean, they could go on. And I know, I mean, Ms. Nolan made it very clear that she had the same concerns at the last meeting when she spoke as an individual. And I feel like now if you're feeling good about it, and I know Judge Martinez is, I mean, she's pretty on top of things. I can't imagine that they would have given us that without being able to meet those deadlines. And if by August, which will be right the first day of school, they're going to give us their breakdown of almost everything, not their final until the last month, then I don't know that we're in a crisis situation. And I hate to just, I mean, having volunteered and done a lot of that, for us just to sit up here and just throw away all of that they have put in is troubling. I don't.
I'm not trying to throw it away, but it's trying to say, okay, we appreciate the timeline, but for what decisions we need to make, we need the timeline to be this, and we've already granted a pretty healthy extension.
Right,
I mean,
but they're going to lose staff. They're going to even lose their staff support for in July. So, I mean, to me, I don't.
They haven't met a deadline yet. And so
Okay,
you
let me-
only go based on past performance, and the past performance
Let me make a comment on that.
isn't really.
I'm going to make a
inspire
comment
our
on that.
confidence.
I made a comment to the group, I think it was in January. We told them initially when this was put together, starting June 21st of last year, the resolution was passed in here. The task force was put together a couple weeks after that. Then they started having meetings. And then I think the preliminary timeline was to be December, make a recommendation by December. A lot of changes happened in between there. Since January, I think, and that's when the Vice TV channel was in there, there was some discussion about what is our priority. They changed. We had these two board members right here rewrote the charter and gave an overview, changed it slightly. And so that's a kind of change as well. So there's been some changes.
Well, the change was the timeline they added. There actually wasn't a timeline in the
then-
original one. They added the timeline.
Well, there was some discussion about it in December. Then they rewrote it in January. We looked at it and said they were kind of reassessing. They lost one of their chair people. Then they lost the second one. So just in the last couple months or so, they've gone through a lot of changes, and I'm confident that they're also going through uncharted territories. I've heard a lot of people say, "Would you as a subordinate, would you give them an extension? Would you give a student extension?" In construction and in business, unfortunately, it happens. And because they're going through so much, and because there's a lot that we didn't know about the details with legislature, funding, they're digging through a whole lot. So I applaud what they're working on.
I applaud what they're working on, but I think, and I really, what my mind would be, I'm not talking about bumping it up a ton. I'm saying, though, let's have a special meeting in August to hear the first part, and then at the August meeting, then bring the plan. I'm not trying to just put them under the gun entirely, but let's just speed it up a little bit.
All right, Mr. Maths, waiting.
Yeah, so I had originally thought that we would get a set of options, if not April, maybe May, maybe June. And I don't want to rush the task force, and if they need till August or September, I don't want to rush them. But I don't want to rush us either, okay? So I don't want us to start talking about this in September. I think we could just start adding conversations to our agendas in parallel with the task force meetings. You know, of course, we're not going to make any final decisions or recommendations until we hear from the task force to weigh in, but I don't want to be stuck in neutral waiting for the handoff. So I originally thought it was going to be like a relay race. You know, they give us the baton, we take the baton, and go the next leg. But if they need more time, we'll let them take more time, but let's not let that stall us.
Hey, Ms. Weir and then Ms. Feller.
So I guess if we were going to do something like that, you're not going to be here on the 20th. So we're still going to have to push that back to our next meeting in August, which is when they're going to give most of their presentation.
We
And
can
I will
have the
just
conversation.
Say, I know.
I
I will
mean-
just say though, Mason, when you said the whole deadline thing, just let me just say, as a McNeil parent, we've given a lot of extensions to staff. We can give a couple months to this task force.
Well, then I look forward to seeing everybody at all our middle schools at the first day of school to talk to parents about why there may or may not be SROs there.
Well, we just talked about that. There is coverage for this coming year, similar to what we've had with slight tweaks. And, of course, we always need more, but I understand that. Ms. Feller.
So my recommendation is, looking at their timeline, is the final presentation on September 19th. Our regularly scheduled board meetings are long with recognitions and everything else that we just have to have on a regular basis. I would love to see us have a meeting, a workshop, maybe a week or two before the 19th of September to get their presentation to really, and that's the only topic on the agenda, us talk about it, work through it. I don't want this presentation to happen at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. If we could plan it now to have that, and then that allows us as a board on the 19th, when there tends to be more community members show up, to have a discussion about what we learned and our thoughts going forward. But to get a presentation that night and then to have discussion, I mean, it's one of the criticisms that we've had in the past is that these things happen so late at night. So if we could maybe give them a deadline 2 weeks earlier or a week earlier and just have a workshop that's just one action item, not even an action item, one discussion point, and all we do is talk about it, then that might free up our regularly scheduled programming.
And I might suggest that we're going to do that. Let's do that for August, too, because I didn't think about that, how that is the very first day of school. And probably all of us and staff would prefer to be with, we're going to be here, not regardless, but let that be a meeting that's focused on other stuff and celebrate the first day of school and see if they can't.
Well, and
bump that up.
TASB is September 20th, so that's the day after that night, so putting us here really late. I don't even know what's planned for the agenda. We're talking months away, but just trying to be respectful that if the task force members come to be present for that presentation. I know when the CBC presented, we had a lot of CBC members in the audience, and to wait and wait and wait, to be really respectful of their time. We had a specially called meeting when the CBC presented their findings to the board, and that was all that was covered that night. So, it's just throwing that idea out there, but our regularly scheduled meetings can go long.
I know. I agree. And I'm open
meetings?
for that. So go ahead. What's
No,
that?
I was just saying, our meetings go
That's right.
long? Are you kidding?
I'm open for that. So if we can.
No, I like that idea. I think it's more than fair. And, we have to be careful that when we start talking about other issues that we're talking about apples to apples, and we have extended the timeline for them. And I think it is time, just because I don't want to sit here and start talking about what we could do without the recommendations. That just feels weird. That doesn't feel right, because then it sends a message to the community that we've already made up our mind without having that input from the task force.
And I don't think it's made up our minds. I think really it's just the fact that we look at a calendar. We know when, as indicated, when people are, when the Wilson County and Round Rock are going to stop providing the service. And you back that calendar up, and the timeline keeps getting compressed. And I'll say it right here. If we end up going with our own PD and it gets rushed and an I doesn't get dotted or a T doesn't get crossed, the same people who are out there frustrated right now, they're going to come and they're going to be mad at us for that. But we weren't the ones dragging our feet.
Okay.
And so we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to start building towards a decision. And we've, as Steve, you put it, we've been in neutral for way too long.
Okay, Ms. Vessa.
So are we discussing, is it because we're out of school, it's open season to discuss the reality of what's happening in our district? Is that what, like in terms of coverage? Is that okay?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question is,
No, generalities.
okay, so we can't talk about that. Okay.
I thought in the past it's usually been, I know that was one of the issues in the past with the gaps in coverage was that we didn't want to talk about it while school was in session, but when school is out and there's no kids present, they're a little bit more.
It's uncomfortable to talk about it any time
It is.
publicly,
I get it,
but I think everybody on the board knows the reality. I've talked to the board before, on where we're covered and where we're not. So
I see the lawyer stepping down here. My views. Okay, I was going to say we're not here to discuss the shortcomings. We just wanted to give an update on what we were given, and just go through a snapshot.
But maybe the community doesn't understand what Mason's talking about.
Yeah.
Like maybe they don't understand the reality that we have coverage gaps on the east side of our district, and there's a reason why we have coverage gaps. And honestly, I think there's something the community can do about it. To be honest.
Well, I would just suggest that that's probably part of the discussion that you'd have in August and September, and so defer your discussion till that time.
But I don't know that that's too late.
I don't think that. What I understand is you have coverage of the kind that you've traditionally had that's going to be covering this coming year.
But it wasn't good we had coverage gaps last year. Right. Then we would like to deal with them, and I feel like the community can be a partner in getting those gaps filled. Because it's not up to us. It's up to our law enforcement partners, and they have not been willing to, that they have felt that their coverage is sufficient. Maybe the community doesn't feel their coverage is sufficient. Maybe they should, as they have elected officials that oversee those law enforcement providers. Maybe they should communicate what they feel like would be sufficient coverage for their schools.
So I would just say you're entitled to discuss the item as much as you want as a board. I think what I've heard, though, that you have an existing process that maybe there's a difference of opinion as to whether or not you're going to get a soon enough recommendation from the task force. But having said that, my understanding is that the board is waiting for a recommendation, or is hoping to have a recommendation that they can.
I think options.
And options. Sorry, options.
I think what Mason's saying is that we need a long-term plan. What I'm talking about, but then he's bringing up the fact that next year, on our current plan, is insufficient, and how are we as a board going to have to go and address to the parents that we said this was okay,
and that there's no proactive steps being taken to address it moving forward.
But they're two separate things, because
I agree, they're two separate things.
The contract for next year is very different than what the task force is bringing forward for 2 years in the future.
So what I'm saying is, can we talk about it as a
Dr.
separate
Presley's
thing?
already working on next year. Staff. I think Dr. Flair's right. Staff is already working on taking care of next year. So
do we have? We're taking care of next year the best that we possibly can with the existing arrangements, and this is precisely why last June 17, which you were 2018, there was a resolution that was adopted. And what I, as the superintendent, and I'm fine because I do believe that the task force is working and they're working diligently. Ms. Nolan stated tonight that they're at a good place. So the recommendations, if that comes in September, or the options, I should say, come in September. But make no mistake, this is why we tried to provide this clarity last June so that these gaps would then be discussed for this year. But that train left that station a long time ago. And really and truly, it seems like the real question for me is if the clarity from Sheriff Chody on next week is something that he says, hey, this is doable, then I think we can expedite. I say as superintendent, expedite the process and the option, because I do think, again, and I'll be clear, and I've said it 15 times, 20 times, if it's Sheriff Chody that can do that and they do it, let's do that at the point that this board decides what that is. But there was pretty clear indication from Judge Gravel, and that's why I applaud the president for having that meeting next week that will give us a lot of clarity, and it'll give that task force a lot of clarity. But make no mistake, as superintendent of schools, with a resolution that was adopted in June, and here we are, the hope was, and that in November actually, that we would have had to look for some things, but we knew that there was going to be some changes to the board. And I will tell you that when we talk about, delays and other things, and saying that McNeil the delay, that's a much different type of delay than what we're talking about here. And so that's all I have to say on the topic at this point.
Mr. Meth.
So likely when you speak with Sheriff Chody,
there'll be clarity.
I don't know if there's going to be clarity. I think in fact, I think there's going to be lack of clarity. He'll say, well, I'll do it if the court allows it. And that we've been in this circular logic for months now. So we know that Judge Gravel said he doesn't want to do it, but he had said he did want to do it at one point. We know that
Chief Banks?
No, Cook. I don't know. I'm not a politician. I don't know.
Commissioner Cook.
I think I heard her say, and I think I read in the paper that she's okay with it. So let's put it to a vote. I mean, I don't know that you're going to get clarity on
a vote of the commissioners' court or a vote of us.
Well, I think we would need to vote to authorize individuals in good faith to bring it to the commissioners' court for their vote.
But we would do that before the task force recommendation.
Well, it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg. You need to know if it's an option, if it's a true option, before we could hear it being an option from the task force, right?
I know it's going to be. We'll see. There may be clarity. There may be. It depends. So we'll find out. It's just another. It's a step. I made the request several weeks ago. He was out of town. Then we kind of got a variety of things. And it's good timing now that we're going to be meeting with him next week. I think it'll be good timing. That will be maybe some of this stuff will be resolved. Have some feedback. So anyway.
So what? I'm just asking. What does clarity look like? Clarity would be if Sheriff Chody said, no, I'm not going to do it.
That's pretty clear.
Right? If he said, I
Yes,
will
but.
do it,
Yes,
is
but.
that clarity?
It's an option. It's part of the.
Not really, because
No, it's not.
It's not
because it's not
control
up to
the
him.
fund.
Exactly. So, I don't want to tell you not to meet with Sheriff Chody. I think that's good. But
be.
I just don't think we're going to be any clearer 2 weeks from now than we are today.
Then when the task force puts together their recommendations, they can put just like the bond committee said, this is option 1, 2, and 3. Or they can put a probability. We like this one a lot. This is our first preference. Here's the second one. Here's the third one. And then it comes back to the board, and we decide whatever the options they provide. We look at it and decide, well, I don't think that third one's going to fly, so don't even consider that one. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm trying to meet to give it an option. Hopefully we'll get a clarification. Anyway, Ms. Feller.
You brought up a new topic, but I wanted to circle back and ask, I know you're not speaking for the task force, but would it be a significant disadvantage if we asked for your presentation 2 weeks earlier at a workshop to really have time? Do you think that would be, yeah, you can come back down here, please. Anybody else who wants to join, but
I don't want to put her on the spot.
Yeah, we can ask.
I know you're not speaking for the task force, but I don't know what work is really behind all of that, but we want to make sure that we're giving the time.
I know. Why don't we ask Ms. Moore and Ms. Judge Martinez, and that way, and let them decide if it's doable. They'll send us an email when they come back in 2 weeks.
I would say that would definitely be something, especially because we've gotten in different groups. It may be advantageous to some and disadvantageous to other groups. So
good point.
Okay.
So we'll follow up with that.
We'll follow up. I'll meet with Ms. Moore next week and may talk to her tomorrow. Just kind of a recap, I'm sure. But anyway, we'll ask
we could
them.
go ahead and get those. If they're
can certainly
agreeable
ask.
to it, we
Yeah.
could go ahead and get those on the calendar and plan some times.
Yeah.
So.
And Mr. President, I'll say I respect the task force, the work they're doing. I appreciate the hard work and the time they're putting in. I guess my frustration is just that we've gotten to this point. And I hope that moving forward, with whatever committees or task force we form, we can form some stricter guidelines about timelines, deliverables, and expectations so we don't find ourselves in this position. Because it isn't fun knowing that we have to come up with the solution, and just the can keep getting kicked down the road because. And I don't blame the task force. They've come, they've asked, and we've said yes. I think this comes down to the board in the future be willing to say no, we got to come up with an action.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yes,
sir. Dr. Flores.
I just want to say,
wanted
I'm sorry.
to ask
I'm
a
sorry.
question.
I cede to Ms. Nolan.
I know next week, certainly with our breakout groups, especially the one that I'm on, there are a list of questions that have been compiled. And so, if there can be some expediency exercised in getting those questions addressed, especially because we will not have district support for a couple of weeks in July, that would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, that is good to know because I remember specifically asking Ms. Moore what else she needed from us 3 different times. So that would be, and when I say us, I mean staff as well. So we're willing, to do whatever, but we have to know, and it, like you said, like you're asking for, in a timely manner.
Yeah, here's one thing too. I just want to make sure that I'm clear. I think Sheriff Chody and Chief Banks have both been very clear, and so I want to commend them for their clarity even a year ago. But what I want to make sure is that what we don't do when we talk about the gaps in coverage on the east side, we're talking about Round Rock PD. That's precisely why Chief Banks had given the, I guess, April 2017 letter that said, hey, these are the things that are going with a growing city. We're going to have some conditional, situations with that. So I want to make sure that we know that that's not their intent. They just knew that there would be those kind of gaps. So they do the best that they can. And I also commend Williamson County for this past year, tremendous coverage with the schools that they were allocated to. And the reason I say that is because that's our best option right now, and that's our only option. And I don't want them to feel alienated, and I don't want them to feel pushed, because I can tell you if they did, they'd walk away from it, and we would have a bigger crisis than what we would have with that. So I just want to go on record that they've done a tremendous job of trying to do what they do with what they have. So Dr. Presser will be at that meeting next week as well, so that the update on the coverage for next year will be pretty much finalized. Thanks.
Thank you. Run real quick. Officer Willoughby over here is Westwood SRO, been there for years. Thank you for being always here as well. And I understand he had a wonderful time at the graduation with all of the students, very close kinship. So thank you for your work in building that relationship that we always point to. So anyway. All right. Any further discussion on the task force? Thank you. I thought that would be a 5-minute review, but that's all right. I will give this board credit for being thorough in this community, for being very thorough and detailed. So with that, I'm grateful. We have nothing else on the agenda. So with that, it is somewhere like 10:33, and we are adjourned. What is that? Okay.